right, greetings everybody, and welcome to Conflict Radio. It is actually November 26, 2024, and this is what I'm going to do for you guys. All of season 1 is in the members archives right now, except for some best ofs that we were doing. So every day for the next month or so until we get through these, I'm going to be doing 2 or 3 episodes a night, little specials like this of some of my favorite. We're just going to go through all of season 1, but we're going to take out the crappy episodes, the ones I don't like. So right now we're going to do episode 5 and episode 8. And episode 5 is Lucid Dreaming, Nightmares, and Intuition with Craig Sim Webb. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these are just audio only. So you can put them on and listen to them in the background, or just put them on and fall asleep to them, whatever. I mean, you don't have to worry about watching a TV or anything. They're all audio only. So episode 5, Lucid Dreaming, Nightmares, and Intuition with Craig Sim Webb. And then we're going to do episode 8, The Power of Past Life Regression with Steve Burgess. And I hope you guys really enjoy it. We're going to do this every night for the next 30 days or so. And I hope you guys really enjoy it. It's going to help get this channel it's going to help get the channel some traffic. And it's also going to help us get out from underneath the stigma that we're under right now with fluff tubes. So we're going to do episode 5 and episode 8. I hope you guys enjoy. Until next time, guys. We also will be putting up new shows, but those new shows will be premiering during the day. These are going to be nighttime premieres, and I hope you guys enjoy them. I hope you all are having a great holiday season. And we'll see you tomorrow and see what 2 or 3 episodes we'll do tomorrow night. But that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to do these 2, and I hope you guys enjoy. You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to another episode of Conflict Radio. This is episode 5, and we're going to be speaking with Craig Webb. But before we get into that, let's go over some of the news for today. It's Tuesday, June 23rd. There's a massive Sahara Desert dust plume drifting towards the United States. I've been looking at this thing on the satellite. It's massive. Just a massive dust cloud. I could just imagine what this is going to do for allergies. Powerful quake has hit southern Mexico. A tsunami warning has been issued. A powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck southern Mexico on Tuesday, today, triggering a tsunami warning along the Central American Pacific coast and as far south as Ecuador. And I'm going to have to follow this story to find out what's going on with the tsunami, but I haven't seen anything going across my screens that anything's been hit anywhere. So I'm sure it's a warning. I'm sure things are fine. And did you guys see this video of this guy that he caught an 8-foot shark with his bare hands? He was just swimming in the ocean and literally just held it there, pulling its mouth open, posing for pictures. An absolute crazy video of this guy. The beach is full of people. If you haven't seen that, the headline is, "Swimmer catches an 8-foot shark with his bare hands and pulls its mouth open to pose for pics." It's got a video and everything, and I'll tell you, that's pretty impressive. So talking about Craig Sim Webb, Craig is also a widely traveled speaker and musical artist who has done pioneering lucid dream research at Stanford and designed peak performance devices distributed worldwide. His book, The Dreams Behind the Music, reveals little-known dreams that inspired tremendous success for over 100 famous artists. The highlights principles and techniques anyone can use to harvest their own dreams for significant breakthroughs. Now, his website is Craig Webb, that's 2 B's, webb.ca, Craig, C-R-A-I-G, web, 2 B's.ca. Another website, applieddreaming.com, 2 D's in the middle, applieddreaming.com. and dreamsbehindthemusic.com. So those are his websites. Go check it out if you're interested in our conversation and you want to follow up. Definitely, I'll put the links in the description, and definitely check out his websites. Lots of really interesting stuff to be seen there. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get right to it. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Craig Sim Webb. And welcome back to Conflict Radio. We are with Craig Sim Webb. Craig, are you there?
Yeah, glad to join you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So you're our dream guy, right?
I've had worse titles.
Dream expert. You definitely have quite the credentials here. Why don't you tell us about your recent book?
Well, not exactly recent, but a few years ago, I published The Dreams Behind the Music, which is actually a combination of two of my big passions, dreaming here, which I guess you are aware about. But also for many years, I've been interested in and performing music and songwriting also. And so bringing together both, because it turns out I have a pretty high knack, or I guess a pretty frequent knack for lucid and especially musical dreams. So dreams that actually contain music, sometimes soundscapes or sound effects, sometimes just sounds, but most often melodies, something like a hook once in a while, a whole piece, like a longer multi-minute, but usually 30 seconds or less. You ever dreamt music or anything like it?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, it's not too common. Probably under about 10% of the population's had musical dreams that they can call upon with easy memory.
Yeah,
so it's a little rare, and I feel lucky about it.
Thinking about dreams that I've had, like you hear people talking about, oh, I dream in color, or oh, I dream black and white. Honestly, I don't honestly remember if my dreams are in color or if they're black and white. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're in black and white. Like I would notice that when I was dreaming, but looking back, I honestly don't have any idea.
Well, it probably means that what I often hear from people, and when I check with them also, so it's kind of proof-based here, or at least feedback-based, is that the color is not usually too important, except maybe for vividness of recall, other than when something specific is in a color. I don't know, like the red car, or this person had on a blue shimmering dress, or something like that. In which case, then it ends up being important, but more symbolically. If a person remembers something in color, it might just be akin to saying, hey, I really have clear, vivid recall. And so they tune into something that they interpret as color. But the symbolic aspect ends up probably being more interesting and usually more important when we want to interpret and act on dreams. There's actually, in my book, The Dreams Behind the Music, there's a number of artists. Pharrell is a huge one, but Sting, many others, I think especially Beyoncé, who actually get visuals, sounds, colors, or sort of more colors, shapes, and then they interpret that as music, or sometimes they get both together or something. So they kind of have a synesthesia, which is an interesting variation on dreaming colors and music together.
So I understand that you have a degree in physics. How did you start working with dreams?
That's an interesting one. I kind of got kidnapped, I like to say. I wasn't really interested in dreams. I wasn't against it. I was just minding my own business, studying pretty objective physics at university. And then I did have a powerful near drowning right around that same time. Got stuck under a whitewater raft without really any time to grab a breath. Had a powerful experience of thinking and kind of realizing and emotionally coming to this rich, deep peace. Wow, I'm dying. This is it, under the raft. It was a bit surprising because it was peaceful, which I wouldn't guess, However, after that experience, I did make it out alive, as far as I can tell here. I started remembering up to about 10 dreams a day out of nowhere, like really clear recall, and sometimes into following days. So it was a pretty strange opening. And I started noting the data, at least I was open-minded, and writing them down, started seeing lucid dreams. We can speak about that. Started having musical dreams, which have been continuing since this to this day. and then started having pretty clear premonitions, another interesting aspect of dreams, sort of the psi or maybe the psychic aspect. I usually don't call it psychic, but PSI, the psi aspect of dreams, where you can tune into people or information or locations at a distance or across time.
So what do you could you define like what a dream actually is?
That's a pretty tough question. First of all, everybody will have a different interpretation. I could go with a rough definition that's mostly accepted. First, we have to kind of choose between the dreams that we have for our life, my wishes, my hopes, those kind of dreams, and then sleeping dreams, or let's say altered state dreams. In the second case, it can be all kinds of variations. It can be dreams that are sort of half awake, thoughts that we have just after awakening, or maybe just before going to officially sleep. And then tons of variation in between and beyond. During the night, we have these long, kind of slow thoughts, and we say, oh, I was just awake, but with electrodes on. And I've had this experience in the lab, in the sleep lab, that it was actually stage 2 sleep, deeper than REM sleep, which is in stage 1. So there's strange variations in there. And then in waking life, we have these daydreams, deja vus, and lots of variations that aren't our current physical sensory input. So they seem like dreamlike events. So when I usually speak about it here today, I'll probably mostly mean visual dreams that we have while physically asleep. It's just so we clarify.
All right. And I was reading an article you did for, is it Veritas introduction? Like it says, have you ever dreamt of being chased, falling, or have your teeth fall out?
Sure, yeah. Veritas was a magazine, national magazine in Australia that I
see,
wrote
now
for
I've had dreams in my life where I've been like in front of a mirror and I'm brushing my hair and my hair is just falling out. What is that? What does that mean?
Well, I don't always go for one interpretation fits all, just so listeners can be empowered. Sometimes you can get a pretty quick archetypal type of dream and give a direct hit or a direct, kind of a universal connection for most people. But remember, every symbol can be a bit personal, even though there's sometimes kind of a universal aspect. In this case, any concern that we might have, as like myself, perhaps yourself, I'm not sure, a little bit older middle-aged gents, sort of concerned from time to time about hair falling out, it might show up in our dreams. Some people have teeth falling out dreams. Usually people who are speakers or maybe on the radio, or sometimes their looks are very important to them, actors and things. Although there's lots of other levels of universal connection for the teeth falling out dreams. One aspect would be a concern that we have in waking life. So perhaps a connection there. And does that feel like any connection to your dream?
Well, I definitely don't worry on a regular basis about my hair falling out. I've been very lucky.
Okay, good.
In that
so
aspect
perhaps
of things,
something symbolic.
But yeah,
hair more archetypally connects with thoughts. What grows out of our head. Yeah. So symbolically, maybe just letting go some thoughts that weren't serving you. What was the feeling in the dream? That's usually the most important thing.
Like, oh shit, my hair's falling out.
So unpleasant surprise.
Yeah, like oh my god, what's happening?
I would imagine something important you were letting go at that time. Do you remember when it was?
No, not really. It's been years. It's just one of those. It's actually happened a few times. Okay,
well, if you track it, you'll probably find something, and this is more general for all the listeners. They can track their own dream the same way. The feeling in the dream, let's say surprise, a little bit upset in your case, we'll actually have in the day or sometimes a few days before, or once in a while the day after the dream, a very direct connection with the same feeling in a waking event. It's kind of the Rosetta Stone that connects the languages of waking and dreaming, the feeling. And then when you say, hey, where else have I felt this, or where might I feel this today? If during the day, all of a sudden you feel like freaked out a little bit, surprised at having to let go of something, or something's changed that you weren't ready for, then you go, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's probably connected with my dream this morning or yesterday or whenever it was.
Do you think that it's important for people to remember their dreams and to log their dreams?
It's super valuable. There's tons of payoffs if we start to look at the content of dreams, basically connecting with our intuitive wisdom in a pretty strong way, more direct way than maybe waking life. So direct line to the inner net, I call it, of the subconscious. But also, even just the fact, if we never look at them or try to interpret or go lucid or any of these things, just the fact of writing them down or maybe voice recording them on a smartphone or a voice recorder, it actually helps strengthen or deepen neural pathways that boost that channel of information. And since dreams are pretty much the same as intuition in terms of information, then we are boosting our intuitive capabilities when we just record dreams. So there's a few of the benefits, but we can talk about many of the other very practical ones in waking life. For example, my book, The Dreams Behind the Music, 200 plus artists, 100 really well-known names from McCartney, Sting, Paul Simon, Beyoncé, etc., actually have dreamt many of their biggest hits, Beatles' two biggest hits. Sometimes career guidance, whether followed or not followed, but when followed, very beneficial, and when not followed, sometimes very serious repercussions. John Lennon, a famous Beatle there, actually had a very powerful, I think 3 dreams, 2 of them pretty clear, with specifics, not just vague stuff, where he pre-dreamt his murder about a year before. And he was pretty nervous about it, waking up, and he told people the dreams, and a busy life, etc. He probably forgot about the dreams a year later, but it happened pretty much exactly as he dreamt it with the details. So these things can be very important in our life. Some big benefits there. Not usually quite as serious as life and death, but once in a while.
You did an entire chapter on musicians and their dreaming and how it brought them lyrics and songs and stuff. In fact, you even have some songs with lyrics that you've gotten from your dreams, right?
Yeah, sometimes I dream the music, like Billy Joel. He actually says pretty much every song he's written has come from dreams, and he most often dreams the music. Once in a while, he dreams lyrics, kind of like me. I'd say more like 30-40% of the time I get lyrics with the music. Not 100%, but 30-40%, maybe a little less than half. Sometimes I just get lyrics. Sometimes I get inspiration ideas, so it can vary. It's kind of the creative artist muscle, tapping the subconscious directly, especially if we're lucid, if we're conscious in the dream. You can actually look around or interview people or ask the dreamweaver to throw out some music or something, or whatever else we're interested in, artwork or business insights, stock market guidance, friendship, romantic guidance. So lucidity helps boost all of the benefits, but those are a few of them.
So lucid dream, you talked about that a couple times. What exactly is that? That's controlling your dreams, right?
Well, that's the word that's a little more common. I'm not so crazy about the word control, although I know it's out there quite a bit. I like to put forth the idea of having more presence in the dream. So really mindful, more of our waking consciousness, our waking mind joins us in the dream. And then also, if we want, and as we develop more skill with it, because it's learnable, you can, like maybe learning an instrument, how to play guitar or violin or something. It takes a while to become a master. Same for lucid dreaming. We can start to guide the dream more. So I usually use the word guide, but guide respectfully. Imagine if we're directly connecting with our subconscious wisdom, we don't want to power over and change everything and destroy everything, because probably there's some valuable things in there we might miss out on or sort of cut ourselves off from. So respectfully guide is what I suggest when people get a little more
My
skilled.
wife actually had a question she wanted me to ask you while I was talking to you, and she's been having the same dream every now and then for like the last 10 or 20 years. And every time she has the dream, she'll get a little farther, or she'll be able to change things up and do things a little bit differently. But it's pretty much the same dream. She's wanting to know, what does that mean?
Probably it's if it's multi-year, spreading across like multiple years, it's probably directly connected with an important life lesson. We all have some lessons in life school here on Earth. And so when something comes back, let's say more than a few months in a row, as a recurring theme, or at least a recurring idea or some kind of aspect, maybe sometimes a character is the same or a setting, then it's usually directly connected with a strong lesson. I would say in this case, learning to become a little bit more aware of her dreams, maybe to go more lucid more often, and then also develop a certain creative direction. Depends on the specifics of the dream. But would she say, or do you know if she usually ends the dream positively, or is it kind of not pleasant or dark or nightmarish?
I don't think it's nightmarish, but I can't tell you if it's positive or not. Maybe that's the point of it. She's trying to get to a positive ending in
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Often when a dream recurs, it means part of the lesson hasn't been learned here. Like when we redo a class in school, it's because we didn't fully master it. There's a few examples, very positive dreams that are just kind of a feedback of our feelings, maybe like a flying dream. Hey, we're light and free and feeling clear in life.
Yeah, or
Uh,
swimming underwater, like underwater dreams where you're breathing underwater and stuff.
yeah, that's pretty much flying. We're weightless. It's just, and then waking life, we don't interpret that as flying. But if you're scuba diving, it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah,
Like my dream this morning, I was scuba diving, but it's, let's say, weightless, free. I imagine if it's not as positive as one of those dreams, that there's a lesson. And she might want to ask herself, and listeners can ask themselves for any recurring dreams, hey, what would be my best ending? And really sit with that. Don't just like quickly answer, but sit with what our subconscious, our deeper self would answer as the best ending. And usually it starts with the feeling. So make sure you include the feeling if it's not so pleasant a feeling. And then you can even visualize the new ending and feel into it just before sleep. And then you give a pretty clear message to your subconscious where you're headed, or where you want to head anyway.
That's pretty interesting. I have a recurring dream that I've always had pretty much since I was a kid. But it's always I'm in a treehouse, and every time I have the dream, I get to go farther into the treehouse.
Like different explorations, different rooms.
Yeah. Like it's and when I'm dreaming about it, I'm like, yes, I'm in the treehouse. Like I know I'm dreaming. I'm in the treehouse. It's like awesome and great. I love dreaming about the treehouse, and then I'll go and explore and check it out. And then when I wake up, I'm always so disappointed that I woke up I just want I
Dreams
just
are
wanted
so
to
much
go
more interesting.
just wanted to go farther into the treehouse.
Ah, good. Well, that sounds like your personal variation on a more generic, universal, actually worldwide theme, exploring new rooms or exploring new parts of a structure, in this case, the treehouse. And that's pretty symbolic of developing new abilities, new qualities, or sometimes tapping into old parts of our lives, feelings, memories that we haven't looked at for a while. So it's usually pretty positive, though. So that's good.
So, what do you think causes nightmares?
That's a pretty big one. There's quite a number. I'll start with two big classes of nightmares. One is that it's just more of a physiological dream. Sort of, we had big pizza at midnight and probably too much MSG or something on it. And we have a nightmare, an upsetting dream. Sometimes medication or other substances can trigger that. Sometimes even loud noises can trigger it, although that's usually bridging more into night terrors. These are what I call more physiological nightmares, and depends. Each person uses different words. Night terror, nightmare. Little kids might say, "Oh, that was just a bad dream or upsetting," but they won't say nightmare. So you have to check in a little bit with each person. And then there's more the symbolic level or emotional level dreams that actually have content that's worth looking at. By the way, just to kind of wrap up that first class of dream, when we do have upsetting dreams from the big pizza or whatever Chinese food right at midnight, that's still a pretty clear suggestion. Don't have Chinese food at midnight because we had upsetting dreams, so our body didn't like it.
Do you
But I
think
wouldn't
that it's
bother
a, do
interpreting
you
it.
think that it's an ingredient in the pizza or an
Yeah,
ingredient that we're
could
eating
be.
that's causing that?
Any food we eat, and of course medications and things like that, substances we take, that definitely affects our dreams, our psychology, our physiology. So it could be something in the pizza or something that the time that we had it right before sleep. And the message is clear: don't do that. The body wasn't too happy about it and had a nightmare.
Can you
If it's
tell?
a little, go
Sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, you go
yeah.
ahead. You go ahead.
I was just going to say we can finish yours. I was going to move into the second class of nightmares, which are a
Oh,
little bit
okay.
more
I
common.
just wanted to ask you real quick. What was the worst nightmare you've had, if you're able to share?
Well, I used to have an experience. This is childhood now. I've moved quite a bit past this, where I would dream there was kind of a evil person or maybe a robber or somebody bad anyway in the house coming to get me. And I wasn't sure if I was awake. I wasn't sure if it was a dream, etc. So I was kind of half awake. Sometimes I would actually get up and like stand near the door in case they came into my room. But it was recurring. I remember over at least a few years having this upsetting dream, which is actually a pretty common universal theme. Somebody after me, chasing me, or or something, some person I don't recognize in my house or in my structure, maybe my tree house, my basement, my somewhere. And so for me, there was part of myself that I wasn't aware of that was scaring me. That would be a quick interpretation.
Okay.
More commonly, people usually see this as adults, let's say, or teenagers to adults. They'll see it as chase dreams. But sometimes it's someone knocking at the door, or a scary figure outside the house, or an animal, a strong emotional energy that we haven't dealt with. Wants to come home, wants to be included, wants to be incorporated. If it's chasing us, it wants to be integrated into our psyche. But it's not always something easy to deal with, and that's why we've kind of pushed it away, like and we're bridging into the second type of dream here naturally.
Okay.
The recurring themes, the recurring dreams, where some part of our psyche is giving a strong message. So there's sort of two subclasses for this one. Often it's something from the past that was a trauma. Maybe we had an actual trauma, a car accident, or I don't know, we got robbed or something in the street, something pretty upsetting. And then it's playing out, or a lot of the war veterans have this from really scary waking scenarios that they've lived through.
Yeah.
So it's kind of playing out the trauma and still looking to heal, move through, most often feel the feelings of something past. A breakup could even be a slight trauma, depending how bad it was. And so it's coming back at us. Sometimes it's chasing us, whatever it is, usually a character, but sometimes an animal, a storm, an unknown energy. And it wants us to look at it, feel it, and move past the fear. And then the second subclass, and we can talk some specifics in a second, but I'm just giving the general. The second subclass would be the same thing, but now in the future. And you'd be surprised that actually 2 out of 3 people at some point say that they've dreamt something pretty clear that came true later. And 1 out of 3 people can actually pull up the specific thing. And when we look at it a little more scientifically with sort of checking the data, was it something pretty rare? Did they tell somebody the dream before the event? 1 out of 12 people, roughly, depending a little bit on the population, has actually had a very clear, provable precognitive dream. So it's something that's happening pretty often that we're not really talking about. And they're not always nightmares. Usually nightmares are of that type we usually call warning dreams. There's something dangerous in the way that we're going to decide something the next few days or next week, or there's something in our psyche that's going to cause us a breakup in this relationship, or a blowout at this job, or maybe a health challenge. Sometimes the very strong nightmares, like demonic level kind of things, they can be warnings of sickness a few years down the line, and we're trying to heal it emotionally before. So warning dreams.
Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. Now, there's another class, isn't there? Like a sleep paralysis nightmare.
Yeah, people
Or
always
would you
call them
even consider
nightmares.
those
That's
as
kind of
just
in the
dreams?
halfway between physiological and maybe interpretive. Sleep paralysis and sometimes alien abduction, evil presence in the room. There's lots of variations on the same thing. Is sort of physiologically based. There's a little part of our brain stem, the pons, that switches off the muscles when we dream, which is a good thing. Otherwise, we'd be acting out all our dreams and probably never sleep much. It's a pretty serious disorder when we do that. It's called REM behavior disorder. So we act out all the dreams. But usually it turns off the muscles when we're dreaming so that we can have a normal sleep. But once in a while, the little switch that turns off the muscles doesn't always go on right away. In other words, we wake up, we're conscious, we kind of know we're in the bedroom or in our body, and yet we can't move, we can't speak sometimes. And so it comes as variations on nightmares, or sometimes people have like a demon on their chest. These things are usually associated with what's more generally called sleep paralysis and a few variations. And a quick lesson for anybody suffering from those, because more often than not, people had that in usually around high school or whenever they weren't sleeping very regular patterns, is that there's an easy way out of that. It can actually be a pretty beneficial event if we interpret it a little differently. We have to not go into fear of, okay, wait a minute, I'm about to die, or I'm dead here, what happened? So no freaking out aloud. We kind of shift a little bit, wait. And you have to use some intellect and some courage here, but you say, wait a minute, okay, I've never been as relaxed as this because I can't even move my muscles and I'm probably in bed. So this might be a pretty good opportunity to maybe face the fear of death, or at least relax into what could be a lucid dream, or maybe an out-of-body experience, or at least very, very peacefully and slowly wake up. Most people find out that ends after about a minute or two. Have you ever had any of those experiences that lasted longer than a minute or two?
Honestly, I'm not really sure. You know,
Yeah, most people say very short.
yeah,
I've heard it like 4 or 5 minutes, but not like 3 hours or anything.
yeah, I've had some definite dreams where I've been trying to wake up and haven't been able to wake up. You know, but I don't recall being like in the room, like my eyes weren't open. You know what I mean? Like I was actually, you know, like, oh my God, this is a horrible dream. Like I need to wake up, and you know, I'm
I'm
not
out of
able
here.
to. Yeah, 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 but I'm just not able to. You know,
Yeah.
and
Well, that might be the same little physiology. It says, wait a minute, there's no need and no point to wake up right now. If we become a little more lucid, this is a friendly suggestion, no critique here, but you might say, hey, wait a minute, when have I ever had as good a chance to face a fear or something I'm scared of? Why would I need to wake up if I could change the ending or at least change my interpretation? And then you can get a little more empowered before it ends. So it could be that's what your subconscious wants, or it might just be your physiology saying, no, it's still time for sleep. Don't worry about it.
yeah. Now, some people have nightmares on a daily, nightly basis. What would you suggest for people who suffer from nightmares?
Yeah, there's a pretty small percentage who have like regular, let's say a few times a week nightmares. I usually encourage people to check what their sleep habits are first so that it's not just physiology dreams, basically triggered by the room or is too hot or too many blankets. Sometimes that alone can change it, or too many bedclothes, not to necessarily say always go naked with no sheets or anything, but just kind of think about temperature. Definitely think about diet. So check some of the physiological factors, and then also try to be on the same schedule so that it doesn't get triggered just by physiological things. If it's not that, then probably the person wants to check a little bit more about traumas that they've lived. Maybe if it's a war veteran, that's a little more obvious. But if it's somebody, let's say, who hasn't been in any super serious physical trauma, what emotional trauma have they lived recently or a while ago? Maybe a relative passed. Maybe they had a terrible breakup or a job loss or, I don't know, coronavirus. So if they can kind of check reasons where they might have experienced trauma, that sheds light on things that the dreams are trying to bring to light. In other words, there's some feelings down there that haven't been felt, and the nightmares are pointing to them. And then you can learn skills. Maybe lucid dreaming is one. It's not the only skill, but a pretty good skill that can help us change the ending and usually be free of these types of recurring dreams forever. Should I give an example?
Sure.
So this is a pretty good example. My dreams have actually coached me to share this example publicly because it's got some nice universal archetypes. But a dreamer I worked with, her name was Mimi, which is an interesting name, just symbolically, me and me. But she had chase dreams, which is a very common worldwide theme. 80% of people, or 4 out of 5, have that dream at some point. And she had them recurring, probably about a couple times a week. And she said, how can I, get through this and face these things? I'm terrified. And it also ruins my day. I'm tired. I didn't sleep well, and et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, there's lots of techniques. One of them, she liked the lucid dreaming technique. So she kind of went with that, and I trained her a little bit. She said, okay, next time I dream, I'm going to remember what you said. I'm going to try to become conscious. I'm going to look at my hands to make sure I'm dreaming. And then I'm going to try to change the ending. Not just after she wakes up now. This is because she's lucid, so she can do it in the dream, do something new. In other words, not just react and run away, which she normally did, but respond and be more empowered and hopefully more courageous. So she got excited, and I saw her a couple of weeks later, and she pulled me over quickly because we were in a group gathering. She said, I did it. I said, did what? I'd forgotten, And she said, oh, I had the recurring chase dream again, this time in the car, and the pursuer was right behind me. I saw her in the rearview mirror. And so I hopped out of the car, running on foot. And then it was just like all those other recurring dreams, running on foot, some guy chasing me. I remember what you said. I sort of had my lucid moment, and I took out my courage because I still felt the fear, somebody unknown behind me. But I took my courage and said, no, I'm going to do something different. I whirled around and I screamed at the person, this is my dream, and you can't hurt me. And, there was kind of a pause. They looked at each other. And then after a few moments, he said, the pursuer said, hurt you? What are you talking about? I've been running after you this whole time just to tell you, actually, I love you. And she saw that he had really, friendly, kind eyes, and he took her hands, and she was like, what? He says, yeah, well, you've been running, so that's why I've been chasing you. And symbolically, it's sort of interesting. He dissolved into her body and she woke up very energized, much different than all the nightmare endings where she woke up pretty stressed out and short of breath. And then she commented to me just offhandedly, she said, what's interesting in waking life since in about the last week since I had this new dream? First of all, I hadn't had the nightmare again, so that's new. And by the way, I did check with her 2 years later and she never had it again. So she kind of got the lesson or maybe healed the trauma. But she said, when I first met her there, I noticed this week in waking life at the office and with my boyfriend, I respectfully, but I stood my ground a little more. I sort of voiced my opinion, or I spoke up for my raise a little bit, or I said something respectfully that I wouldn't normally say because I'd usually run away or avoid it. I don't like conflict. But I changed that, and I think I might have gotten the emotional lesson from the dream, stand my ground a little more. So she was pretty happy with that one. And I think that's what the recurring themes often bring us, especially nightmares, but even other dreams. Hey, what thing is recurring? How do I normally habitually respond? And what might I like to do differently if I'm looking for a more interesting ending or more interesting waking moments too, if it translates into waking life?
That's pretty interesting. Do you remember what your very first nightmare was?
I don't know about my very first. Probably the one I spoke with you about before, of some kind of evil figure or robber or somebody entering the house.
Yeah. I actually remember mine. I had to have been 3 or 4 years old, at least the first one that I remember, where I used to have a set of dinosaurs when I was a kid, little plastic dinosaurs that I played with. And I had a nightmare that I was running around my neighborhood street where I grew up, and there were dinosaurs loose in the street. And I remember running to a payphone, because, that's what we had back then, trying to call home collect, so that my mother can come save me from the dinosaurs. But, some dreams that we have as kids, some people put off into like a past life experience. What do you think about that as an idea?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of frameworks. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting a strange echo right now.
You're getting an echo?
Like a really strong one.
All right. Well,
should we retake that question?
Yeah, let's take a break and we'll be right back after this. All right, we're back from a break. I think we got the audio issue taken care of. You there, Craig?
Yeah, great. No echo now.
All right, awesome. We have the question I was asking was kids and how they have sometimes a past life dream. What do you think about that? Do you believe in past life dreams, or maybe past lives, or what do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of frameworks that we can use to describe the many varied experiences, which are also varied per person and across cultures. Don't forget. One of the frameworks we can use is past lives, or kind of a timeline, a linear timeline, past, present, future. From a dream perspective, keep in mind that we're pretty free of time anyway, because the physical senses are mostly turned off during dreams. So to tune into, in waking life, what we might call the distant past, or time before our current life, or to a distant geography, something physically distant from our current surroundings, or to a future event, something across time, but in the future. It's actually not rare. In fact, it happens pretty much every night for every person, although we don't always remember them or interpret them. So it's not uncommon at all. If we want to talk in that kind of linear time frame, so the past life model, there are quite a few examples of, or at least some examples, I don't know about quite a few. I've come across at least a few dozen, let's say, in my 30 years, where there's pretty clear connections and verifiable too, with different events that have happened in the past, maybe with the person as a past self. One that really sticks out was actually reported on by ABC News, if people want to check it out. It's an interesting one. It's the case of James Lenninger. I think the Cuomo, what's his name there? Not the mayor of New York, but his brother, Chris Cuomo. Actually did the interview. And they interviewed a child who, at first his parents thought, oh, that's upsetting nightmares. Sorry that you're having those, James. And he said, oh yeah, I'm in warplanes. They're getting shot down. There's terrible battles going on, and so on, and so on. But when the child started having, and usually before about age 5 or 6, so that's important for these type of dreams, because then we get a little bit more enculturated and our inner senses turn down a little bit, and it's harder to tune in like that. But I think he was 4 or so, and he was having these dreams. But they started getting very specific, and he was naming the planes and naming places. And his dad says, I wonder where he's heard about this. I don't think he's ever heard about these Corsair planes or this place near Japan. So he started investigating a little bit, just out of interest, the father did, and started finding that there was actual places. So he took his child to I think an airplane museum or something like it. And he goes, oh, there's my plane, Daddy, from my dream. And he came right over to a Corsair, and he started looking and showing and naming the parts of the plane and all kinds of things, which there's almost no way the young child could have known. So the dad was pretty intrigued, and he started investigating and interviewing about the dreams. And they eventually got to the case where he was shot down in, I think, a Japanese raid, and his partner was right beside him, and he wasn't shot down. And so they checked, and they eventually found the partner in waking life, in physical life. And they tracked it, and the partner said, yeah, he was shot on this side of the engine, but nobody except me could ever know that. And he'd seen, the young kid had seen it in his dreams. So there's interesting verifiable ones, and then others that are a little less verifiable. But my general sense of them, having seen, is that there was a very strong trauma in a past life, if you want to talk about it like that. Mm-hmm. It usually sort of percolates into this life as sometimes night terrors, nightmares, or sometimes very strong fears that don't really have a basis, like somebody might be, often there's people who's afraid of, let's say, spiders or something like that. But maybe somebody's really afraid of ducks, and they're like, what? Where did that come from? But who knows? Maybe in past life they were drowned somehow in a pond full of ducks as some kind of dark Middle Ages ceremony, or who knows. But something where there's a strong connection with a past life trauma that really hasn't been healed. And it's actually not too different from our current lives, because we have nightmares about traumas that haven't been healed in our current life. So it's not too much of a stretch for me to believe that it might happen across some deeper level into other lives. So that's kind of what I'd say about that. But I think actually past life and future life elements, and also probable realities, sort of like side timelines, maybe choices that we didn't make as we remember them. Mm-hmm. But some part of our past self made a different choice than we did. Those we tune into all the times in dreams, but it's a little tougher to recognize when we're doing so.
So you believe in reincarnation then?
I believe in a little different variation on it, but I would say that our whole being, our deeper psyche, is much more than, let's say, me in this life.
Yeah, well, I agree with you there. It's definitely much more than just this.
Yeah, and from that perspective, like I said, across time, which dreams can sort of go way above the timeline, it doesn't really seem too difficult. In a helicopter, you can see the traffic, for, 50 blocks, let's say. If you're walking around as a pedestrian, let's say if you're in this life, that's the analogy, then you can't really see more than a block or two. So it doesn't surprise me in dreams with that higher perspective that you can see much more distantly into time and across probabilities.
Yeah. Well, do you think that has to do with the fact that the mind is just tuned in sleep mode? The mind is more open to I guess, experiences like that?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good description. You can say one way to think of it, or to say it, is that we have inner senses. Some of them are pretty close to what the physical senses are in our physical body, eyes, ears, touch, etc. And then there's other inner senses, maybe that aren't as obvious, of how we tune into things. Like one example might be in waking life, like radio. We can't really see radio waves. We can't really feel them in our body. I mean, some people can a little bit. But we can certainly see their effects when we have a radio that translates those. Same thing for inner senses. And then there's some inner senses where we can tune into things that are just like almost impossible to translate into waking life, because they're just very alien experiences. So I believe that we're more connected with those inner senses when we dream, yeah.
So premonition dreams, how does that work?
So one of the inner senses is freedom from time, or tuning in across time. That's probably the same one where we tap the past lives in dreams. But in this case, we're pointing the dial forward a little bit. So we're looking at future probabilities. And people might be surprised here. I'm just going to say it because I've worked with many, many people and seen this quite often, that pretty much every night for every person, we're tuning into, at some level, and we may not remember it, but we're tuning into future possibilities, future probabilities, things that are more likely. And we're deciding at a deeper level which events we'd like to experience. Or we're creatively responding to them, practicing our response. So when it happens physically, we're a little more ready. So we're actually tuning into things in the future all the time. You'd be surprised. Sometimes more clearly, and sometimes a lot more surprisingly, like very specific events that then come true. Like I mentioned John Lennon's murder. Another example would be Bono, the U2 lead singer. Mm-hmm. This is in my book, The Dreams Behind the Music, and many other interesting stories like it. But he seems to have a knack for tuning in to create collaborations. I guess he really likes working with other artists. So in one case, he was half awake, half asleep, kind of in that liminal zone or half awake zone before a concert at the Wembley Arena the next day with the band. And he was playing some music in the background, and he was kind of half awake, and he dreamt this melody. Or he woke up with a melody, let's say, and it was Mystery Girl. She's a mystery to me, with a little bit of a melody. And he was, I wonder if I just dreamt that or if I was listening to it. It sounds like Roy Orbison. So he went and looked on the album, which he didn't really know. It was just a soundtrack of Blue Velvet, the movie. Mm-hmm. And he saw there was a Roy Orbison song, In Dreams, but that's not the one he dreamt. So he thought, I wonder if I just wrote it subconsciously. So he started working on it a little bit. He went to the sound check that day before the concert, and he was playing it for the other guys in the band. He said, hey, does this sound like Orbison at all? Or Orbisonic, I think he said. And they said, yeah, a little does. Where'd you get that? Or is that a Roy Orbison song? They said, no, I just dreamt it this morning. Oh, interesting. Okay. He was so into it, Bono was, that even right after the show, you might think he was tired, right? After the show, he actually started working again on that same song. Yeah, I guess after the encore. And then there's a knock at the door in the dressing room, and the guard says, there's somebody here to see you. Should I let him in? He says, who is it? I'm just working on the song. And he says, it's Roy Orbison and his wife. And all the other guys in the band are going, you were pulling our crank. You were joking us. You knew all the time. He says, I had no idea. I never met him. I didn't even know he was in London, let alone at our concert. He goes, but that was pretty strange about my dream. Yeah, let him in. So Roy Orbison, the actual guy who, the Beatles opened for, came in and he said, hey, good concert. I really enjoyed it. I'm not quite sure why, but I did enjoy it. And by the way, do you have a song for me? The second thing out of his mouth, do you have a song for me? And Bono said, wow, I guess I do. And Bono ended up producing that song on Roy Orbison's last album, and that was one of the big hits on the soundtrack for, I think it was Aquaman movie a couple of Christmases ago. Mystery Girl, she's a mystery to me. So he dreamt up a song and a whole collaboration, and we could say, and my guess is, he kind of tuned into a very fulfilling future for himself. First of all, Roy Orbison being at the concert, but then also of a possible collaboration that could be really fulfilling before Roy Orbison passed on. And he brought it to life by remembering the dream and then acting on it.
That's pretty interesting. There's a lot of stories about people who dream they're winning lottery numbers.
Yeah, I've gathered a few of the lottery winners. There's usually a little bit of a catch in those dreams. It's not quite as easy as I dream it today and I win it tomorrow. One of the ones I've seen is the guy dreamt the numbers very clearly. I think he was a taxi driver, except that he did play the same numbers for a long time. He had to play them for 26 years before he got the winning numbers, which was still okay that he won, I think, 65 million. Well, that counts in terms of probabilities because the number of days in terms of the number of chances to win a lottery is way less in 26 years than the chance of winning. Yeah. Other ones, they usually have to pass a test of some kind or a challenge. Or once in a while, they'll get a bit of a freebie, but it's usually not quite as big an amount.
What do you mean, a test or challenge in their dreams?
Yeah, they missed going to buy the ticket, or they might have had a challenge what to do with the money or who to include. Or there's usually a little bit of a catch. or it's a smaller amount. Like sometimes, a little more often, I've seen dreamers, a deceased relative comes and they win a few $100s, just to show them that it's possible and to help them out a little bit. But it's not like, 50 million or something like that. There have been a few, and my guess is there was some little key factor in there, but I haven't tracked them personally.
Interesting. So, premonition dreams. So there's cases where people have been able to avoid like catastrophe, really, from being warned in their dreams. Is that not true?
Yeah, there's some pretty serious ones. So I just want to do a little bit of an overview. Some of the examples we're giving today are a little more extreme, and people shouldn't really be freaked out about premonitions because, first of all, a lot of people don't necessarily believe it's possible to dream of fairly accurately of the future, sometimes thematically, but sometimes like almost exactly, right? I can say I actually dream a few times a week pretty clearly of the future, but I'm okay with it. And also I teach and speak about dreams. So it's probably a little more part of my job description. But it's pretty easy and natural for everybody. Pardon?
I'm sorry. Does that have anything to do with remote viewing? Is that kind of the same thing?
Well, it would be a similar series of inner senses, sort of the channels of inside info that we have in dreams. That kind of info will come through the same channels or slightly varied channels because like the colors of the spectrum, the inner senses overlap a little bit. So if we see something at a distance, for example, let's say remote viewing, we don't usually tune into or we don't usually experience the actual event in waking life until after the fact, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at it from a time perspective, it actually is about something in the future, except it's also about something physically distant. And we're aiming to look at something at a distance, but we won't find out if we're accurate or not until the future. So there's strange overlaps to these things. But yeah, it could also be telepathic. There's another overlap. We tune into somebody's thoughts, but we find out later when they share the dream with us that, oh, that's the same thoughts that they had. Like actually John Lennon and Paul McCartney ended up having the same dream on a morning very early in the Beatles' career when they were thinking, should we stay working together? We've had a little success, but it's a lot of time. And they dreamt of digging up gold coins from a can in the backyard. And they said, it's a pretty interesting dream. Maybe we should continue. And McCartney kind of added a little comment when he shared the dream that you could say it might have come true. And I think he's worth $350 or $400 million or something now. So yeah, it came true. So we're tuning in with inner senses to, let's say, unusual things for our physical world. Not too common. People tune in unless they call themselves psychic. But actually, it's pretty easy. Anybody listening to the show, I can pretty much guarantee you could do it tonight if you wanted to, if you believed it was possible and started exploring it. It might take a little bit of skill to really start interpreting correctly and then acting on it. Don't forget, usually it's going to ask us to stretch, expand, and grow some more courage. If it's going to bring any kind of benefit, we usually have to face a fear or move through a challenge. So just keep that in mind a little bit, but certainly we can start exploring right away. So don't end up fearful. A lot of people who have dreams of the future get very scared of it, or they feel guilty. Wow, I didn't save so-and-so because I had this dream that they were really sick or that they killed themselves, or very serious things. But these dreams don't come for fear or guilt. I just want to really give that early.
Yeah.
But then they can often come for benefit. Sometimes it's touch and go, and it's not obvious which probable future is going to happen. For example, the backup singer, I think her name's JoJo Billingsley. Forgive me if I pronounced incorrectly. But she dreamt of the band that she was singing for, who I'll say in a moment. But she dreamt of the whole plane crashing down in flames, burning, everybody getting really dismembered, and really, really ugly dream, right? And she woke up, terrifying nightmare. And it turns out she wasn't on tour at that moment. She was taking, I think, about a 6-month break. And the next day, the lead singer, who was Ronnie Van Zant, so Lynyrd Skynyrd is the band, actually called her and said, hey, would you like to come and join us for the next concert? I'm not sure. I think it was in Louisiana or somewhere around there. And she said, no, I can't. And you shouldn't go either because I saw the whole plane burning, crashing in my nightmare, etc. And he said, what? And she explained in details. And it was really strong. And she, I guess, was pretty convincing. It was so convincing that he didn't just blow her off. The whole band had a meeting. And 2 guys actually booked flights on other planes. And they were wondering, should we go? Eventually they decided to take the plane as the last flight on that plane, because the pilot had been doing a little bit of questionable stuff, I think, with marijuana and stuff. So I say, okay, this will be our last flight, but we do have the concert and all the fans waiting tomorrow, so we have to go, you know. But the backup singer didn't go, and I guess the two guys who booked on other airlines, they did go. And unfortunately, the exact dream did come true, and I think 19 people were injured and about 6 killed, including the lead singer, and many other synchronicities around it. So a very specific, clear, timely tuning in of a warning. Unfortunately, a very serious last-minute warning that some people, I guess the backup singer, followed and others didn't and had a really unpleasant ending.
So what tips could you give somebody who is trying to have premonition dreams?
First off, realize that developing a skill like that should always have as a basis or as an intention, as a goal, let's say, to help people or to grow ourselves. If we just want to, hey, I just want to win the lottery, or something that's just going to be kind of self-centered, or perhaps even darker, how to get inside info on other people and abuse it, or Inception, you saw this movie,
Mm-hmm.
how to change somebody else's world without that usually won't work as well, and probably won't be too inspiring for our overall character growth. But if we take it as a special gift that many people have developed, one pretty big dreamer who actually saved many lives using the skill was Harriet Tubman. You know who that is?
Yeah.
I think there was a film about maybe 8 months ago, Harriet Tubman movie. And it showed pretty clearly how she dreamt clearly the different ways to walk across streams or places to go to avoid enemies when she was saving and rescuing a lot of the blacks and the slaves. So it could be very practical stuff, but she also trained for like 20 years before. So think of it as a learning curve of a pretty interesting, a challenging skill, I can say, from having worked at it for 20, 30 years. And gracefully sometimes and not so gracefully other times explored what it can mean and acting on it, that it's a powerful thing to know the future in this case ahead of time, have specific inside info that's acting on. We can't just be the same or do the same thing in life that we could have done if we didn't know better. Now we have some inside info. There's a little bit of responsibility added, or sometimes a lot of responsibility. We need to act on it. Not always perfectly, because we're allowed a little bit of learning curve, but our psyche watches, and fortunately it feeds us a little bit at a time. So I encourage people to grow the skill and the learning organically. It's good, if we have a little knack and we've had premonition dreams, sometimes it runs in the family, then explore it. It can become a great benefit for your family, for your health, for others, or creatively for artistic inspirations that could help many people. But then again, remember that it's a pretty powerful, like high-speed inside vehicle of some sort that we should want to drive it respectfully and learn slowly.
Now that does run in the family, doesn't it?
Usually, yeah. Often, I would say it's passed on by what I call emotional genetics, more than probably physical or DNA genetics.
Uh-huh.
Although even DNA genetics are flexible. But
what do you
emotional
mean by
genetics
emotional?
is that there's a strong belief that it's possible, that it's valuable. For example, certain cultures, and many of the native cultures worldwide, I'd say almost all, have a pretty strong, different, let's say, framework where it's interesting and beneficial to have these kind of dreams. In Native Americans, there's Maskan as kind of the psychic dreams, the Aboriginal dreaming of dream time. There's so many different variations in names. But when we have these kind of skills that they can be used respectfully and then learn slowly. In fact, just to show you a little bit the edge that sometimes is quite a challenge, the shamans, this is from research worldwide by a friend of mine, research shows that for about 7 to 14 years, the shamans don't really accept their gift or their calling, let's say, to start tuning in this way and tuning into other people's dreams and also, going through some pretty tough life lessons. They don't really want this, and that they, for lack of a better word, go screaming and kicking for 7 and 14 years before they fully accept their calling. So it's a big challenge to have to dance some of these things. Now, we don't always have to become as, let's say, intricate and as skilled as a native shaman who helps the whole community. We can explore a little bit on our own and keep in mind that it should be used for benefiting ourselves and others.
Yeah. Now, a friend of mine has cancer, and he's it's not very good, prognosis, I guess, for him. And
Sure.
they've got him on morphine and all kinds of different pain medications, and he
Yeah.
says that the I guess the painkillers or whatever really affect his dreams. Do we know why that is?
Yeah, well, different medications will affect in different ways. They'll definitely, there's strong effects on our physiology. And since dreaming is physiology based, any medication, especially psychoactive or like mental, mind, neuronal type of medications, like morphine is a strong one, that affect nerves in the brain, etc. That's going to have very strong effect on sleep cycles. So it might have more dreams, clearer dreams, vivid. Sometimes it'll have effect on which parts of the brain are sort of active or not. In other words, lucid dreams, there are specific substances that help with that. Or sometimes certain substances actually more or less limit dreaming entirely. Although we can sleep through it, certain types of sleeping pills and also alcohol, a lot of alcohol, not just like a glass of wine.
Yeah.
But can really limit our actual dreaming. No rapid eye movement sleep if we're strong on certain. So it's strong. Each one's a little different. I would say for your friend, first of all, a lot of empathy. That's a really tough challenge. But that if he wants to connect with that aspect, he probably wants to keep taking the morphine. But he can also do little waking journeys or imaginary explorations in waking life where he doesn't have to be asleep and he might have a little more success. Or he can tune in emotionally. Sometimes it's a little easier than mentally to whatever the important things he'd like to track or experience. Usually around those times, there's a lot of healing with family or with self, things that we've had a hard time with ourselves. We're not too happy about, or we feel guilty, or et cetera, where a lot of benefit could happen if we track things a little bit emotionally before, I call it graduating from Earth. But having said that, I'll just emphasize again a ton of empathy for your friend. That's a very tough situation.
Yeah, and I was reading somewhere. I was reading up on this a little bit ago, and they were saying that if somebody is say they're dying, and they're dying over a period of a week or 2 weeks or whatever, that their dreams are a lot more different, even if they're not even taking anything. Like you said, maybe it's because they're guilty about things in their life or reminiscing more about their life. But do you think that maybe it's possible that the dreams are perhaps getting them ready for
Yeah,
a
that often
crossover?
happens. There's some pretty well-known themes. Preparing for a journey is kind of the general theme. Sometimes a train ride, a flight, going somewhere, heading out, boat journey, etc. So that's often symbolic of heading out for the big journey away from physical reality. There's often lots of healing dreams with family or with past. Sometimes, depending how much like inner work, spiritual or emotional work the person has done, that can be really beneficial, super happy, enlightening, kind of like, hey, we're ready to jump off kind of dreams. But yeah, definitely we're closer. We're sort of nearing the place where our physical senses have turned off entirely and our inner senses are going to be operating again. So like on the edge of the veil, let's call it. That we're tuning in better. We can usually have more vividness, or we can tune into events like with some of the psychic skills, or we might actually start already experiencing a future life. And you don't have to be near death for any of these things, but it's probably a little more likely then.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned a little bit earlier the coronavirus. How does the pandemic affecting people's dreams? Do you think that it is at all?
Yeah, well, there's been quite a bit of research now, I'd be surprised, in the last, let's say, 6 months-ish, to show that a number of people, not everyone, but almost, let's say, the majority of people, are having much clearer recall, what they call vivid dreams. My sense generally about that is that people just have a lot more downtime, or the world's a little more relaxed, schedules are a little more relaxed. Not everybody and not all the time. But they have a little more, let's say, time bandwidth, a little more spaciousness. And so it's natural for dreaming to come in clearer, more vividness, more frequency, sometimes more lucidity. Also, when that starts happening, and this has come up to when we have a little more in touch with our subconscious, in other words, more frequent and more clearer dreams, that's when the nightmares come for people who haven't really been in touch before. So if you've just started having coronavirus nightmares or upsetting dreams or recurring dreams, that's probably a good thing. people can check out an article on my website there. It says nightmares, lucky you. And people are a little surprised.
what is the website?
Well, the Nightmares article directly, if people want that, they can go to nightmares.info. That's a very quick link to that article. Or they could go to my speaker site, and to my presenter site, and see that's Craig Webb, CraigWebb.ca. And there's a few articles there, how to increase recall and a few other things. One of them is the Nightmares article. And it shows some of the worldwide common themes. And it explains why these upsetting dreams might come if we haven't had recall for a little while. Basically, the psyche saying, oh, good, they're listening. Here's the stuff you haven't cleaned out, spring cleaning. And then also it shows some of the themes that probably are likely for a lot of the listeners. Chase dreams, or dreams of falling, or sometimes visitation from a deceased, or nude in public. It's not a super common one, but about a third of people have that, scantily dressed or naked in public, and a number of other universal themes, car out of control or the brakes failing, this kind of thing. And then some of the positive dreams. I sort of equate each of the challenging scenarios with a positive scenario. Example, positive scenario of being closed, trapped, stuck in a small space, which some people have, would be your treehouse dream there. Opening new doors, expanding, exploring more deeply. So we want to change the feeling, and then usually if we change the feeling in waking life, or maybe in the dream in real time, if we're lucid, then usually the scenario changes. And really that feeling, that sort of choosing our response, that can translate into any waking scenario. So it's a very practical thing. We don't react, get fearful, or get angry in waking life nearly as much once we train the new ending.
That's pretty interesting. Well, so where do people get your book?
Well, I can check out Amazon, The Dreams Behind the Music. They could order it directly from the website, dreamsbehindthemusic.com. And I'll just mention that there's a whole number of stories in there of different types of artists, from classical to shamans worldwide, to many pop artists, folk artists, soundtrack, game, like computer game artists, etc., who actually dreamt a lot of their biggest hits. I think 20 plus Grammys, at least that I tracked, and probably many more, came directly from dreams. So there's a very special knack for creative dreamers to tap into this source of very valuable info that can reach many people, or at least intrigue many people. Some musicians track that, and many musicians know that quite a bit. But a lot of the, let's say, listeners might not have thought, wow, they can directly tap their dreams for creative inspiration. And then also, if those people who find this a bit interesting or helpful, or they like some of the things I've shared, I do offer online trainings, teleclass adventures, I call them. Usually a small group, something like 8 to 12 explorers, and it's very interactive. We learn the principles, just like in the book. Every time I show stories, or I show, let's say, dreams of like Sting, I show some of the principles and the ways that he's able to dream up songs like Every Breath You Take, or Walking on the Moon, or ones that have done very well. And so in the teleclasses, we all do our own experiments each week to explore skills, and then we report the results. So it's very interactive, and it's also very sort of empowering, because I'm not just talking and telling people what to do. For that, they can just get a book. And then it's usually a nice, fun community. Everybody learns and empowers and inspires each other. So they can check that out at Applied Dreaming, with 2 Ds in the middle there, applieddreaming.com.
Awesome. Can you offer any dreamer call tips?
Yeah, sure. That's a good way to get the doorway open for some of the listeners. So if you're not having great recall, or you don't remember, or you have a few dreams now and then, but you don't remember too many details, or they're not very vivid in sort of colors and things, start to think of it as a channel of information, maybe like on a music mixer. Have you seen these mixers before that have, let's say, 6 channels? Yeah. One for the trumpets, one for the drums, one for the singer, etc. So on channel 1 of our mixer that we're pulling up as an analogy will be what we call dreams. There's probably lots of sub-channels to that channel, but let's just call that dreams. It doesn't come through physical senses, mostly. And then on the other 5 channels, we have our physical senses: touch, sound, sight, taste, whatever. And then when we're sleeping, most of the channels 2 to 6 are turned down. In other words, our eyes are closed. We're not moving, so the touch channel is pretty low. Balance really isn't changing too much. However, since the dream channel didn't really change, and maybe even went up a little, that we can hear or tune into dreams a lot more clearly then. So that's the analogy to use. And then the specific things that'll really help knowing that analogy is just end up just not moving the moment you wake up. In other words, keep the touch and the balance very low. Don't change your body position. Or if you rolled over and you forgot, then just as soon as you remember, try to roll back to the same position exactly you woke up in. That'll help a lot. Try not to open the eyes because the visual channel really blows out dreams pretty quickly. Or if you opened your eyes, just close them as soon as you remember. If you can avoid waking up to an alarm, you can always set your alarm for the exact time you need to get up, but set an intention or what I call a body clock for maybe 15 minutes ahead. You have to wake up at 7:15, but you set an intention before sleep. Dear dreams, dear body, wake me up at 7 a.m. so I can remember my dreams. And you'll be surprised. It'll wake you up at the exact moment you request.
Yeah.
A lot of listeners have had that.
You know what?
So that's an example of keeping the physical noise input down. In other words, no ringing alarm, no distractions right when you wake up.
Yeah, something that actually has really helped me, and maybe something for you to think about, is there's a sleep talk app on the iPhone that I use, and it basically runs all night. And if I ever talk in my sleep or something, it'll automatically pick it up. But I find that when I first wake up from my dream, what I'll do is I'll talk about it real quick because I know that app will record. So then I'll go back in the morning and listen, and I'll be talking about a dream that I don't even remember having. Like I only remember it because I'm hearing myself talk about it on the app.
Yeah.
So that's pretty neat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You and Keith Richardson too. That's how he got the hook for Satisfaction. He recorded it in the middle of the night and didn't even remember recording it, but he heard it on the tape recorder. Bow, 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 bow. So I think that's the specific
really
version of the more general coaching I usually do. You don't have to write them down in a book. You can actually record them audio. The only challenge with that is that you usually have to transcribe them, unless you have sort of text to speech or speech to text converter, which I think a lot of phones do now.
Yeah.
But then you can see them later and track them. If you're interested in exploring a little more deeply than just here or there, it's good to actually create a bit of a journal or a log or some kind of database, because you can track by themes, by dates, by certain specific characters, by names, etc. And it becomes far more valuable because dreams don't just come as one-off. They're kind of like TV series. You can get a little bit of insight from one of the shows, but you get a lot more insight when you watch the whole series. So they often come in series.
All right. Well, hey, man, that was awesome. And we sure appreciate having you on.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope that inspires and empowers some of the listeners. And if they're lucky, I'll wish them happy nightmares.
All right. And we'll try to get some people over to your website, and hopefully, some people are interested and they sign up for your dream class and stuff.
That'd be great. If they want to have fun with the team and they like some of what we said, there's tons more available. That's appliedreaming.com.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up for now, and we'll be right back after this. And we're back. Thanks a lot for listening to Conflict Radio. Remember to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, or you can also find us on all the major podcast networks, Apple iTunes, and we're on Spreaker if you choose to go there. YouTube, we're on Twitter, Facebook. The links are all there. Make sure you subscribe. Hit that notification button so that you know when we've got a new video up. We've got some great things coming up, some great conversations coming up. Later on this week, we're going to be talking about Planet X and what is going on with that. So until then, buckle in. It's going to be a crazy ride the rest of the year, I'm pretty sure, news-wise, all kinds of things going on. So just buckle up, say a prayer for your family. And until next time, be safe. You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to another episode of Conflict Radio. Today is July 2nd, 2020, and I just cannot believe that it is July already. Absolutely crazy how fast this year is going. Hopefully, to many, it probably isn't going fast enough. We need to hurry up and get to November 3rd so that we can get back to normal in life. It seems like everything's going crazy this summer. I think we got a lot more crazy times ahead. And I believe that come November 3rd, everything will be fine. Everything will get back to normal and we'll be living our normal lives once again. So we're, about 4 months away, I guess? So hopefully another 4 months of craziness and absolute madness going around, and then we can get back to a normal life. There's been a lot going on in the news. I woke up this morning pleasantly surprised at the news that Epstein's boss has been arrested. Yes, I said Epstein's boss. I encourage you to do your own homework on who this woman is and who her family is, and come to your own conclusions on that. Hopefully she'll talk, and we can finally get some big arrests happening that need to happen, because all of that it's a crime. It's all a crime, and there's a lot of people involved with that. I mean, you don't honestly believe Epstein killed himself, do you? I don't. He had a lot of dirt on a lot of people, and so does this woman. And they need to make sure that nobody can get to her. Hopefully they've learned from the mistakes they made in the Epstein case and can actually keep this one alive. But going into today's show, Steve Burgess is with us. Steve has been a full-time hypnotherapist in East Yorkshire, England, and Norway since 1992, and in that time has completed over 15,000 one-to-one therapy sessions. He is an internationally acclaimed therapy trainer, running courses for a variety of organizations around the UK and in Norway. Steve is a former vice chair of the UK Guild of Hypnotist Examiners, and he is accepted as an authority on hypnotic regression, as well as being an advanced EFT practitioner and NLP master. He has completed many thousands of past life regressions with his clients, and his books, Famous Past Lives and the Power of Past Life Regression, describe some of his experiences in past life therapy. He has appeared on Sky One TV, GMTV, and Yorkshire TV, has been regularly featured on BBC local radio, and his work has appeared frequently in a variety of publications. He now divides his time between Norway and the UK, and he has established a hypnotherapy training school in Norway. His YouTube channel, Hypno for All, contains a variety of Steve's free hypnotherapy recordings. And I have been to his YouTube channel, Hypno for All. That's Hypno for the number 4, all. And he's going to be coming on, and he's going to be sharing with us some stories, and I've got some questions for him, and I'm very curious about past life regression. It's very interesting. This is going to be another great show, so make sure you subscribe to Conflict Radio if you haven't already. We're going to just get right to it. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're with Steve Burgess. He wrote the book, The Power of Past Life Regression. Steve, you there?
Yes, I am, and it's great to be with you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you. Apart from the weather's very poor over here in the UK, and my bike had a puncture today, so I had a very long walk home. down the country lanes of Yorkshire.
Oh, you had to walk the bike back, I guess, huh?
Yeah, which was a long walk. I was a long way away, but actually it was very beautiful because I live in the countryside and we have some beautiful country lanes here.
So I'll be honest with you. I read quite a bit of your book, and I handed it off to my wife last night, and she was actually up till 5 o'clock in the morning. She read the entire thing.
Fantastic!
It really is a good book.
Thank you.
It really
Thank you
is.
so much.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what the book's about?
Absolutely. I've been a hypnotherapist for 28 years, over 28 years now, and I've done over 15,000 therapy sessions. And over the years, I've specialized in regression, hypnotic regression, and particularly in past life regression, which basically means in hypnosis, taking clients back in trance to the causes of their problems, the emotional causes of the problems, which are so often in previous lives. And as a result of this, we are helping people to eradicate all sorts of problems and issues. So that's the whole concept of past life regression. And the book itself is more information about that, but particularly my clients' stories. In other words, clients who came to me with all sorts of issues, from phobias and anxieties and physical illnesses and depression and all sorts of things. And it's their past life stories, what actually happened as they were reporting the past lives when they were in trance. And it's the stories of what happened to them in the previous lifetimes. So that's the concept of the book.
You know, it's pretty interesting about how you talk about the subconscious and conscious mind. Mm-hmm. Can you explain a little bit to the listeners the difference and where the past life memories are actually stored?
Okay, that's a good question. Very good question. I often say the mind is like an iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg above the waves is our conscious thinking mind. And the bulk of the iceberg beneath the waves is the subconscious mind. In percentage terms, the conscious mind is less than 1% of our mind. It's 0.001%, something like that. And the subconscious is 99.99% of the mind. Recent research into the mind suggests that the conscious mind takes on board 50, that's 50 bits of information every second, whereas the subconscious takes on board 11 million bits of information per second. So the difference between the conscious and subconscious minds in those terms is absolutely enormous. Our conscious mind is our thinking mind. As you and your listeners are listening to what I'm saying, they're listening and analysing to what I'm saying with the left brain, with the conscious mind. But beneath the waves, the subconscious, is where our intuition is. It's where our memories are, memories of everything that's ever happened to us, and including past life memories. So it's a very deep and enormous place to work, and it's almost limitless. There is another concept of the subconscious, which I do buy into nowadays, that we all have a higher self. And my belief nowadays, after 28 years, is that the higher self either is our subconscious or is intimately connected to the subconscious. So when we go into trance, when we go into hypnosis, we begin to access the contents of the subconscious. And in a hypnotherapist's sort of tool bag are techniques for taking people back both into this lifetime, earlier in this life, into past lives, and even to regress back into our ancestors' lives. So it's quite often we inherit traumas from our ancestors in our bloodline, and we often have to regress back into their lives in order to release the traumas.
So can you explain about how it is possible to access ancestor trauma? Is it stored in the DNA or in the brain?
Well, I don't honestly know where it is stored. To some degree, most of it, if not all of it, but I think most of it, is stored in the DNA. It's a genetic thing. However, I have had people in ancestral regression who have experienced traumas from their ancestors which couldn't be passed down through the genes. because these things happened. Let's say when my client was alive, and it shouldn't be coming down through somebody who was alive. It should be coming down through somebody who's passed. So my feeling is that there's some sort of energy that also can be passed down. And the nearest I can get to that is just thinking in terms of quantum physics, where things get passed down or things get moved around at an energetic level, and we can't begin to understand that yet. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a definitive answer. Well, that's the best way I can approach that, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of questions that are unanswered in this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Have you ever done a session with somebody hooked up to an fMRI machine?
No, I haven't. No.
Because that'd be interesting to find out how their brain, what sections of their brain are firing.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly some brain researchers and hypnosis researchers that have done this, and they tend to suggest particular parts of the brain when a person is in trance are certainly much more in operation than other parts of the brain. But I'm just what I call a jobbing therapist. I have, my clients come to me with issues. I'm not interested in the, you could say, the science behind it. I just want to get them better.
Okay. So how can past life regression be helpful in the lives we live today?
Okay. Well, the regression model is that all of our issues as human beings come from locked-in feelings and emotions from past traumas. And those traumas take place both in this lifetime. Of course, many of us carry baggage from our childhoods. They take place in past lives, and they take place in ancestors' lives. And it's the past life stuff which I think is the most fascinating, because the experiences that people have and the stories that they tell when they go back into the past lives is quite amazing. And a lot of trauma release from past lives is releasing death trauma. So many times, about 60 to 70% of past life therapy is releasing death trauma. So in my sessions, I kill my clients every day. There's somebody dying every day who works with me, either one-to-one or online in a session. And but it's some people have had horrific, most horrible deaths, and they bring that trauma into this lifetime, often as an energy which has to be released, or as an energy in a particular part of the body. And this is one of the reasons why people get sick, is because certain areas of the body will have trauma from previous lives in them. And unless that is released, then there's the potential for sickness starting. Can I give you an example of this from one of my clients?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And I mentioned this fairly early on in the book. And this is a lady who came to me with a back pain. And this was severe back pain. She'd had problems for years. She had even had surgery, and they couldn't find anything. When they opened her up in the operating table, they couldn't find anything. They stitched her back up and sent her home with painkillers. And this lady was very left-brained. She was in the legal profession, so she didn't know anything about past lives. But when she came to me, and she was depressed because she was overweight, because she couldn't train, and the pain was getting on her, just too much for her. And her subconscious, when she went into trance, showed that there were 4 past lives which were causing this back problem. And the first past life was the big one, was the most significant of the 4. And she went back into the Second World War, where she was a young Nazi officer, a male Nazi officer, who was forced to join up by a bullying father. And this young man, about 17, 18, was a hopeless soldier. So they put him into a unit of Nazis that were going around Europe, stealing art treasures and shipping them back to Berlin, because he was very artistic, this young man. And after a while, he was shipped to the Eastern Front and ended up on his way through to Moscow. And now my client, bear in mind, had no knowledge of this. She's never studied the Second World War in any depth. But she, at some point in the session, and bear in mind, she's laying there with her eyes closed, just talking to me as she's seeing the images, as she's feeling the feelings, and she's seeing the pictures on her mental picture screen. And she described, she said, we're about 40 miles away from Moscow, And I think she said it was something like April 1944. And she said, we're in a little town called Smlensk or Smolensk. Actually, after the session, I checked that, and there was a small town about 40 miles from Moscow by that name. And she said, we're bogged down in the snow. We can't get through. The supply chains have fallen apart. We can't get the petrol. We can't get much food through. We're just bogged down in the snow, and as the winter comes. And there are little Russian battles everywhere, and they're fighting us and firing at us. This young man was terrified. This went on for some time. What I'm leading up to is what actually happened to cause the back problem, because at some stage this young man then made the biggest mistake of his life, because he heard that behind the lines in a village that the Nazis had captured in Russia was an icon in a church, and it might be worth looking at it and stealing it. So he hopped on a motorbike, and without an armed escort, because he thought he was safe, he drove the mile or so to this Russian village. And then, as she's laid in the chair, she's describing what she's seeing. She said, and I'm going to demonstrate this a little bit, but it actually was so dramatic when it happened, I nearly fell off the chair. So she said, I've got to the church, I've parked my motorbike up, and I'm looking around to try to find the entrance. And suddenly she screamed. She jumped about a meter in the air, and she landed on her back, and she was moaning and crying and screaming and choking. And I said, what's happened? She said, I've been shot. I've been shot. I've been shot. And then she was just basically shot by a Russian sniper and left to die in the snow. So it took about 20 minutes to release that death trauma, but she became weaker and weaker, and finally she died and passed over into spirit. And we actually went through that death about 3 or 4 more times just to fully release the energy of it, which is a feature of regression therapy. And she came out of trance. She was amazed. Guess where the bullet went?
Where?
Exactly where the back pain was. Exactly where the back pain was in this life. It went from the back right throughout the front of the body. She came back a week or so later, and the back pain was 80% better. We cleared up the other 3 lives fairly quickly, and the back pain was completely cured, totally healed. So that's an example of how past life regression works and how past life therapy works on physical problems. It's so often death trauma in a past life that can give us physical problems in this lifetime.
So why would that work? Would it be because the subconscious brain is basically then informing the conscious brain of what it actually was, so then the conscious brain just ignores that?
No. It's actually releasing the energy which is locked into that part of the body. And it's like a submolecular energy. You can't see it. You probably can't even measure it on any measurements that we have scientifically. But there's an energy held in the body at that part. And by releasing that energy, then the body starts to heal. I had a client who had tumours on her liver, and she'd been given 6 months to live when she came to me. And we did a lot of therapy on her past. She'd had a tough childhood in this life, but there were 2 past lives. In one of the past lives, she was a Native American squaw who was killed when a raiding party invaded her village, and some brave came up behind her and stabbed her in the back with a knife and killed her. And exactly where the liver was, that's where the knife went. And then the second life, she was in the Second World War, as a young Polish man who was stabbed and bayoneted in the back, again in the liver area. So we did a lot of work releasing the trauma energy in that part of the body. The tumours actually stopped growing. Ultimately, just as an aside, she actually had an operation. We did a major operation without any anaesthetic in hypnosis in order to help the medics to do work on the liver as well, which was absolutely remarkable. And this lady now is like 24 years past her die-by date. She should have died 24 years ago. But this stuff saved her life.
So, backing up just a little bit in your career, what was the moment that woke you up to this?
what happened was I was just a normal bulk standard hypnotherapist. I was trained in standard traditional methods, and I was working for a year or so using standard traditional hypnotherapy. And then one day, a young man came to me in his early 20s, suffering from a very severe anxiety state. And he sat in front of me in my office, and he was shaking, he was hyperventilating, he could hardly get his words out, his body was shaking. He was in a terrible state. And I said to him, so how long have you had this for? He said, well, I've always been anxious. I've always been, he was like this, I've always been anxious. And he's stuttering his words out. But the last 4 or 5 or 6 years since the children came, it's got worse and worse. And now I can't work. I've had to give my job up. I just sit at home all day, just shaking. The medication, the doctors, it didn't help. It's made me worse. And I just don't know what to do. My wife said she's going to divorce me if I don't get better. And he was in a terrible state. So I thought, okay, this is a fairly standard, though severe anxiety case. So I just took him into trance. I guided him into a more relaxed state, took him into a gentle state of trance and then into a deeper state. And he really started to relax nicely. And I'm thinking, okay, so what I'm going to do here is give you some post-hypnotic suggestions about feeling less stressed in the future. And then all of a sudden, his whole body started to shake. And his arms were shaking, his legs, his whole body in the chair was shaking. He started to croak and he was half whispering and half shouting. And he's saying, no, hide, be quiet, hide, in here, hide the children. No, hide them, be quiet, they're coming. And then all of a sudden, he started to scream and writhe at the top of his voice. He was screaming, no. And he was completely quiet. He slumped down in the chair. And I thought, what on earth has happened here? Because I was not expecting this. So I said, how do you feel? He said, I feel wonderful. I feel completely calm. I said, what was happening? He said, it was weird. It was like I was in another body, in another time. And I had a young family and a wife, and soldiers were coming looking for us. And we were trying to hide from the soldiers. And then they found us, and they came in and shot us all. And I died, and I've gone, and I'm dead now. And I feel wonderful. I feel so calm. I've never felt this calm in my life. And I thought, well, I'm glad you do, because that's really how I don't at the moment. It was such a shock. And he said, so what was it? What was that? What's that going on? So he said, let me just... Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
He said, what was it? I said, I think it was a past lifetime. I think that was a past life. Because I knew about reincarnation for many years, and I'd read about it and knew a lot about it, but I'd never done any work as a therapist. What happened is that young man was completely better. It took 10 minutes of taking him into trance and releasing the trauma, and his anxiety state was completely gone. And I thought, why don't I know about this? Because this is significant. Why on earth don't I know about this? So I started to do some research and got some American work for some stuff from America. There's an American Past Life Association, and started to experiment with it and develop it. And now I've developed a system of working with it, which I teach to therapists, who come on my training courses, and it's a system which, if a person can get into a past life, will usually clear their problems, usually very, very quickly. So that got me into it in the first place.
So did you believe in reincarnation at that time, or did you have any kind of a spiritual battle within as you were watching this unfold, like as you were learning?
No, I didn't. I'd actually, when I first got into reincarnation, I was about 13, and it was amazing because it suddenly the world made sense to me for the first time in my 13 years when I realized that reincarnation was a reality. And I'd saw some stuff on TV, funnily enough, with an Australian hypnotherapist who did some amazing work. And so reincarnation then was an interest of mine. I was a practicing Buddhist for a number of years. before I became a hypnotherapist. But actually, that didn't really influence my work. It was really just seeing this young man and realizing that this is significant. So I didn't have any problems with the concept of it. I just didn't expect it to be so powerful.
How about other people? Like say you have a somebody come in to see you about their anxiety or something, and do you explain to them about past life regression, and do they have maybe questions like whether or not you're just off your rocker, say? I'm just being honest,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't usually talk too much about past lives to clients because, from my perspective, I want them to get better. So it doesn't matter whether they believe in past lives or not, as long as they go with the process. I mean, there is a school of thought that there's no such thing as past life regression, and that all of these clients are just imagining things. They're just making these things up, or they've seen something on the TV or read in a book. But I don't agree with that, because I've seen too much of very deep, in-depth therapy, and I've also had clients, and I know about other therapists who have had clients who go back into past lives and then come up with verifiable historical information that they wouldn't have known about. So for me, the vast majority of past life regressions are very real. And in fact, having done so many thousands of them, I can actually spot what I call the fantasy past life at 100 paces now, because they're so obviously different to a real past life. So it doesn't matter whether the client believes in past lives or not. And to be honest, most people just want to get better. They just sit in front of me and say, I've got this problem, I need help. And I just say, okay, your subconscious knows where we need to go. And if you'll allow that to happen, in most cases, then the subconscious will help you to get better.
Do you get much pushback from the mainstream about what you're doing?
Not really. I mean, in the profession, the hypnotherapy profession, I've sort of put my head over the parapet for the last 28 years and advocated the power of past life regression. And some therapists don't like that. But to be honest, more people are fascinated with this stuff than disbelieve it. And even people who disbelieve it are interested in it. So I don't get very much flack. And occasionally I have a client who will come to me and say, look, I don't believe in past lives, and I don't want you to do that. And I'll say, okay, we'll see where your subconscious takes us. And surprisingly enough, sometimes their subconscious will take them into a past life to heal the problem. So it doesn't really matter what they believe. And if they want to believe that it's just a metaphor, a historical metaphor created by the subconscious, then it doesn't matter. It will still get them better.
Now, I was reading one of the stories in the book that said that somebody had gone in and they basically revisited 4 of their past lives. And my question to you is, what is the most amount of past lives you've had from a client?
32.
32?
That's very, very, very unusual. The vast majority of past life therapy cases are between 1 and 7 past lives. It's rarely more than 7. Occasionally it is, but that was very unusual. And so, yeah.
Now that's an old soul, right?
Well, this is always interesting, you know. I think most of us are old souls. My take is that we've all lived many, many, many lives. I mean, Tibetan Buddhism says we've lived countless lives over countless aeons of existence. But I think most of us are old souls. Having said that, I did have a young chap who came to me for therapy who was a teacher. And there was a sort of a naivety about him, an innocence about him. He was sort of childlike even as an adult in his 30s. And we got talking about this, and he said, I wonder how many past lives I've lived. So I have a technique that I use with my clients called an ideomotor response, which is where the subconscious takes control of a hand or a finger. And the finger or hand moves just to say yes to questions when I ask questions. I can say yes or no to my questions. And this is a technique I use to find out how many past lives my clients have to go through to clear the problems. And I asked his subconscious how many past lives he'd lived on Earth as a human being. And it said there were, 33, I think it was. It was in the 30s. So he then, in that case, to me, was a young soul. Although, of course, it could be that he lived many lifetimes on other planets as other life forms.
So you believe in aliens and such then too? Have you had any past life regressions where they go into detail about being on another planet?
I've had one or two, and I've also done regression on people who have had alien contact, and in some cases been abducted by aliens. I've done regression with that as well. So the first aspect of that was people who have been life forms on other planets. I had one person who was just sort of like a flame energy, no sort of form, but a flame energy. And I had an interesting chap from a Croatian man living in Norway, who he had a past life as an alien or an extraterrestrial who crash landed on Earth, and he survived the crash. And then he spent a long time after that hiding from mankind because he was terrified. He said, the energy down here is terrifying. What is wrong with them down here? He said the violence, and he knew that if he was caught, then he would be in trouble. And he just kept saying over and over, what is wrong with them? It doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be like this. What is wrong with them down here? And eventually, a little bit like E.T. phones home, his colleagues came for him and found him and then took him back up to his home planet, and he was safe. So that occasion, you don't get much of that. Most past life therapy is people who have lived physical lives on Earth. But certainly I had a family. I did some work for Sky TV some years ago, a documentary on people who had missing time. And I was asked to regress a lady whose family knew something strange had happened when they saw a spacecraft, but they didn't know what it was. And basically what had happened is this lady was in her 40s, and she had a couple of young sons, about 10 and 11, and her mother. And they went for lunch one day to a restaurant in England. And as they were travelling home in the car, they all saw a spacecraft, a UFO, which came down right by the car, started shining lights into the car, and then shot off at the speed of light into the distance and disappeared. And when this was happening, they all felt this incredible euphoria, these incredible feelings of happiness and joy and euphoria. And then when the spacecraft disappeared, they all felt really sad. Now, of course, all they could talk about on the way home was what had happened. It was an amazing experience. But when they arrived home, they found that the journey home, which should have taken 20 minutes, had taken an hour and 20 minutes. And they had an hour of missing time, and they all knew or felt something had happened. The boys were deeply troubled, actually. They were getting nightmares for some time after this, and they were very troubled because they couldn't put words around it. So I regressed the boy's mom, and this is still on YouTube, this program. It can still be seen on YouTube. It's called The Real 4400. And basically what happened is the whole car was taken up on board the spacecraft. They were taken out the spacecraft, and then there were beings in there that they couldn't see, which were behind a screen, but they were communicating telepathically with them. And then beams, there were sort of orbs which came around them and started to scan them. And my client, the lady, she couldn't remember any of this consciously, but when she was in trance, this is all the information that came through. And she remembered these beams and these orbs sort of scanning them and moving up and down, and they were all very happy. And then suddenly she got scared because she thought it was going too close to the boys. And she said, no, not the boys, not the boys. And then she relaxed in the chair. She said, oh, they're telling me it's okay. They're not going to harm us. They just want to check things out. And this went on for some time, and then they were put back in the car. The car was moved back down onto the road, and then they drove off. They saw the spacecraft suddenly disappear. And so, for me, that's proof that there are definitely aliens, because this family was a functionally normal family, and they had no benefits to coming up with this story in any way, shape, or form.
So is there a danger of re-traumatization when revisiting some of these?
can be, as long as it's done properly, then there's no danger. And as long as the therapist is trained and is able to move the client through the trauma, then there is absolutely no danger at all. It sounds dramatic. It always sounds dramatic, especially when I'm talking about powerful deaths and people screaming. Usually there's just a lot of tears and sometimes shaking. But if a person goes through a death in a past life, that's in the past life. It's just an energy. It's not going to hurt them now. To release it. But sometimes it's not always fun. I mean, we have to go back through the trauma several times sometimes, and that does take a degree of courage. But as long as the therapist is calm and allows the client to do that, then there's no danger.
Have you heard from any clients about, like did they see somebody before you that maybe did a really bad job and you had to pretty much clean up their mess?
Yeah, I had one lady who came to me. She was very badly traumatized by an inadequate therapist, and she actually had to come, and we did a couple of sessions over 2 days and cleared out. I think there were 4 past lives which we had to release. But that was done, we did 2 sessions, completely cleared it. So yeah, it can happen if a therapist isn't adequately trained. I mean, in my profession, there are some buffoons who are putting on past life regression training courses that last a day. I'd take 4 days to train people in past life regression. And then I even do an advanced regression course for a further 3 days. So it's deep stuff. And, you can't, even if you're a hypnotherapist, you can't learn how to do this properly just in a day.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So what would be the, say we have a listener that's listening to this and is like, oh wow, maybe I can, look into this some. What would be some warning signs, or what would they look for in actually looking for
to try and find a good therapist who knows what they're doing? You should always talk to them. Don't just do it online. Check them out. How long have they been practicing for? Do they sound professional? Do they sound also as if they are not just believing in past lives, but not disbelieving? There are some therapists who will sort of just do it for the sake of it and say, well, we do it because the clients want it, but I don't believe in it. I think it's best if the therapist has a belief in it. And also, I would suggest you don't want anybody who's a bit too new agey. You want somebody who is a credible therapist. I see some people who stand there chanting and drumming and doing all sorts of weird stuff with Tibetan singing bowls in order to get people into past lives. It's completely unnecessary. As long as a hypnotherapist knows how to take somebody into trance, then they should be able to do the work as a past life regression. But I always say, talk to the therapist, get a feel of them, and if they don't feel right for you, then don't go to them. So yeah, that's really the answer to that. I mean, most of my work is online now. I mean, I have clients all around the world online, and we do the regression sessions on Zoom and get fantastic results, absolutely fantastic results. So I don't have to be in the same room as the client anymore. I just need to be able to see them and hear them.
So, have you ever had any clients that haven't been able to go into trance, or is that pretty much you're able to do that with anybody?
Yeah, the vast majority. I mean, it's said that everybody can be hypnotized, but there are some people who don't let go very easily. Usually, controlling men. I'm sorry to say. And
no shock.
Probably 75% of my clients are female. Women are much more able to let go than men. So some people don't let go that easily, and unfortunately, a few people just don't seem to be able to regress, and that's very frustrating. But for some people, it just doesn't happen. Regression doesn't seem to happen. Of course, another aspect of this is what we call kinesthetic regression, which is where the client doesn't see the past life. So they're not reporting scenes in the past life. They're actually just feeling it. And the body is reliving the kinesthetic, the feelings of what happened in the past life. And that can be fascinating because sometimes they're just laying in the chair groaning or choking as they're being strangled in a past life, let's say. And they can't actually see it, but the body is remembering it as if it's actually happening.
That's really interesting. So what is the youngest patient that you've had or client?
7. I regress from 7 years old upwards. I mean, I've had children who are younger than that, but regression is not right for them. They can't really focus for long enough. If I have children younger than that, usually I do what's called EFT, which is a emotional freedom technique, which is tapping on different points of the body to get rid of problems. But 7 years old upwards. And the interesting thing is, working with children, is that if they go into a past life, they don't experience horrible trauma because the subconscious protects them, as the subconscious protects all of us. So, I mean, for example, an adult in the regression, they don't go into something that they can't cope with. The subconscious knows how much they can take. And so if they can't cope with it, the subconscious won't take them there. And so when we take children into past lives, the past lives tend to be fantasies. And often nice fantasies rather than anything else. And it gets them better. So to me, it doesn't matter whether we call it a past life. The child's subconscious says, well, it's sort of a past life, but it's more of a fantasy, but it's a metaphor and it will get them better anyway.
Yeah, now it's interesting because I've heard a lot of stories about, children, 2 years old, 3 years old, that are able to remember their past lives more when they're younger than as we get older. Do you know why that is?
I don't exactly know why. I mean, I think two reasons possibly. One is the fact that if they start talking about these things when they're young, they sometimes get shamed into or get laughed at by the family or the parents or whatever. Don't be so stupid. And of course, the child then feels embarrassed and just doesn't want to remember anything, so locks it down. And I think the other reason is that by the time we get to sort of 5, 6, and 7, 6, 7, and 8, the conscious mind, it starts to take over more. I think for most children, for the first 5 or 6 years of their life, the world is magical, their mind is magical, and therefore it's easy for these memories to come through. But usually, once we're 7, 8 years of age, we become more consciously aware. We're able to think and to analyze more. And I think then the magical nature of the mind is lost to some degree. So I think at that stage, these memories get lost. And certainly my youngest son, Jack, when he was a toddler, maybe about 3, he did actually say to his mum, he said, before I came here, I had another mummy. You were not my mummy before I came here. And he didn't say much more than that. He didn't know much more than that. Although I do believe he is actually the reincarnation of my grandfather, because for various reasons, he's very much like my grandfather. My grandfather played tuba and my son's a tuba player. So very much like him. And that's unusual. It's possible to be reborn in the same family line, but it doesn't happen very often. Most of our past lives are not in our family line. They're in, out of the line.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I was a kid, I remember, the room that I grew up in when I was a real young boy. So I know I was about 2 or 3 years old because that's when we lived in this house. Right. And I remember, how like sometimes when you're falling asleep, just before you fall asleep, like you feel like you're falling out of a chair or something, mm-hmm. and you kind of startle yourself up.
Yeah.
What I had go on, like right about about that state, I would always hear marching, like troops marching.
Okay.
And it always, and I remember thinking, as a kid, like no, I can't go back there. I can't do that again.
Okay.
And I didn't know anything about marching or troops marching down the street or whatever. You know how you have the boots like doosh 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 doosh. Okay. I would actually hear that, and that's pretty interesting. That to think that maybe I was a soldier in my past life as well. Now, what about the claims that everyone in regression thinks that they've been famous?
Okay, yeah. I hear this so often. Everybody claims they've been Henry VIII or Cleopatra or something like that. What I used to say for the first 10 years of my career, I would say that anybody who claimed to be famous was just egotistical. They just had big egos because for 10 years as regression therapist, every single client I had was just a normal person. They were a soldier, a sailor, a worker, a peasant, whatever. And so, generally speaking, for people who claim to have been famous, it's generally not the case. But, this is the but, after about 10 years, I had a lady who called me one day, and she said, something strange has happened, can you help me? She said, a gentleman at work, we got on ever so well, we're quite close and good friends, but he passed a file to me in the office the other day, and as he touched my hand, I got this immediate shock that ran through my body, and immediately I had this image in my mind's eye of a young woman with long hair in a big, long historical dress, and I felt very frustrated. And she said, I can't get that image out of my head. It's there, like 24 hours a day at the moment. What is it? So I said, well, either you've been drinking too much vodka, or it could be past life. So come and see me. And she came to me, and we had a talk, and I guided her into trance. And I asked her to go back into this image that she'd seen. And immediately she was there. This image just opened up. She was in an old oak-panelled room several hundred years ago. Very rich sort of clothing, big long dress, long red hair or reddish-coloured hair. And she said, I'm pacing up and down in this room. I'm waiting for somebody to come. I'm frustrated. And her fingers were strumming on the arms of my reclining chair in the office. And then all of a sudden she said, oh, he's come. And this man came in the room dressed in this very ornate, old-fashioned clothing. And they fell into each other's arms. And that was why she was frustrated. She was waiting for him. They were lovers. Now, I thought at that stage, okay, well, that's a fairly standard past life session to me. But let's move on a little bit. Let's see if there's something else you can become aware of in that life. She then moved into a scene where she's seeing herself on a throne, raised up in front of hundreds of people, and they're all looking at her. And a man comes over and bows to her and says, Your Majesty. And immediately my ears pricked up. I thought, wow, this could be a minor royal or something. So we got more into this life. And to cut a very long story short, it appears that she was Queen Elizabeth, Elizabeth I, who was the great Elizabethan Queen, of course, of England, who was Henry VIII's daughter, and very famous, one of the most famous icons in English history. So we did quite a lot of sessions, and what we came out in the sessions was this incredible love affair that Elizabeth had with Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. That was the man that had come into the room to start with, and that was the man whose hand she touched in the office. He's the reincarnation of Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. So they basically had this incredibly passionate affair, which historians sort of acknowledge. Excuse me, they sort of acknowledge this. But it's always been felt that she's the Virgin Queen. She was always called the Virgin Queen. It was said she never married because she gave herself to her country. She married her country. But in one of our sessions, she actually experienced having sex with Robert Dudley. So she was not the Virgin Queen. And she came up with a lot of information that there's no way she should have known, including, now this is curious, in our last session, she came up with the story in regression that she was giving birth to a young child, and this child, this young boy, upon birth is taken away from her and kept away from her for the rest of her life and brought up somewhere by some courtiers. Now, when she came up with this in the session, I thought, oh no, she's gone too far here. Elizabeth didn't have any children, we know that. But I did a bit of digging, and I found on the internet there is a record of a young man in the 1620s, I think, who was shipwrecked off the coast of Spain and taken to the Spanish court, where he claimed to be the love child of Queen Elizabeth and Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. And the Spanish court actually kept him and looked after him as if he was a member of nobility for the rest of his life. Now, nobody knows that. I mean, hardly anybody knows that. And is it real? But she came through with this story in the regression session, which is incredible. So that changed my attitude about, well, everybody hasn't been famous. Anybody who's been famous or claims to be famous in past lives is being an egotist, because shortly after that, I had another lady who came to me for therapy. She appears to have been Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, Queen Elizabeth's elder sister. And she came up with some fascinating, specific historical information in the sessions. There is no way on this earth this lady would have known that information. She was a housewife. She'd never even read about Mary. And I had to go to history books to verify the information. And then soon after that, several other people came who appeared to be famous. I had one of Jack the Ripper's prostitute victims came to me. Another man was Titus Oates of the Scott of the Antarctic Expedition, etc. So I wrote another book called Famous Past Lives about these, again, the client stories. And, so my attitude is, generally speaking, if somebody claims to be famous, it's probably not real, but of course somebody has to have been has to be reborn as those people. And I will say, in Oslo last year, working with a client there, I've actually worked with the reincarnation of Marie Antoinette, which I know is a heck of a claim, but again, she came up with some great information.
Have you ever had a past life regression where somebody had a really horrible past life, where they were a really horrible person, just full of regret for the life that they lived?
That's a brilliant question. The vast majority of past life sessions and therapy sessions, we are the victim. So most of this is about releasing trauma when we are the victim, when we are being raped, when we are being butchered, when something horrible happens to us, or when a love affair ends and we never come to terms with it, or when a family member dies. But a small percentage of past life regression, I have clients who are the aggressors. And in one case, I had a client who was a very brutal Nazi officer in the Second World War, horrible person, enjoyed killing the Jews, got a lot out of it. And it
Do you
was
know
only,
who that was? Do you know what their name was?
No. I mean, to be honest, I don't go usually looking for names and things, because when we're doing therapy, that's a secondary thing. The most important thing is to release the trauma. Occasionally I get names, but not very often. But at the end of that life, he was shot. She was a male Nazi who was shot and shocked that he'd been killed. And it was when he went into spirit, when he left his body and moved into spirit, his astral body, you could say, then he realized what a lot of mistakes he'd made, and how wrong he'd been, and suddenly the life made a lot of sense to him, because his father had been brutal to him, so he was only reacting to his inner pain all the time. But that, again, when we have the subconscious protects people. So that client, her subconscious knew that she could take that information, that she'd been a bad so-and-so in a previous life. But it doesn't happen very often. But, I mean, in the scheme of things, from a reincarnation perspective, we've done everything. We've killed, we've been killed. We've raped, we've been raped. We've murdered, we've been murdered. So in the long-term scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, whether we've been good or bad in past lives. It's how we live our lives now.
It's interesting to think, I guess not everybody always has they're not the best person, right? That they can be.
Very much so.
Now, what about animals? Have you ever gotten any that have been maybe an animal in a past life?
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, but occasionally it does happen. This goes against the grain, because there is a spiritual concept that once we've achieved a human rebirth over many lifetimes, then we can't go back into animal form. But I have found in some cases that people do reincarnate in animal form. So I had one lady who was a rabbit, for example. And that was a pretty tedious past life session because not much happened. I kept saying, so what's happening now? And she said, well, I'm hopping over here. What's happening now? Well, I'm hopping over here. I had a lady who was a cat in a Greek temple catching mice. I had a lady who was a rat in a modern past life where she was killed, run over by a car. I had a lady who was a camel in a camel market, and she was horrified at the stench and the smell of being with all these other stinking camels. So occasionally it does happen. I think one of the most unusual ones was a gentleman who felt he was a rock in a past life. And
well, that's interesting.
well, it wasn't for me. You can imagine it was one of the most boring regression sessions I've ever done. I was saying, so what's happening now? And he said, well, I'm here, I'm a rock, and I'm just watching the clouds go by. And on face value, this sort of sounds a bit ridiculous.
Well, it's all about energy, isn't it?
Exactly. There is this idea that, I mean, shamanically, I did training in shamanism some years ago, and we would work with rocks and stones and trees. It's like everything has energy. Tibetan Buddhism says that every leaf, every blade of grass has a Buddha in it. So maybe there's a much bigger picture in terms of what we could call consciousness, but certainly energetic consciousness, than we even can begin to think about with our own limited viewpoints.
Now, I want to go back on the animal thing in a minute, but real quick, while I got you on the subject, what about plants? You ever get somebody who was a tree and got hit by lightning, or maybe they got cut down or something, and
No, I never have. That's a very good question, and I never have. And I don't think I ever remember any other therapists or reading of any other therapists who have claimed such a thing. So it may just be that it's like I've never had people who claim to be insects either. It may just be that it's only sort of animal life and human life that we can recall. Maybe.
That's interesting. So can you tell us a story about somebody? I would imagine you just mentioned somebody who was a cat that got hit by a car. I would imagine that that they were able to release their trauma then, or that was that the, you know what I'm saying, like where I'm going.
Yeah. I had a lady who had spider phobia, phobia of spiders, and it was quite a big spider phobia, and she had 4 past lives that was causing this. And one of them, she was a baby squid. The other 3 past lives were human past lives, but in one she was a baby squid. And what happened is she felt that she was sort of pushed out of the nest under the waves too quickly because there were too many baby squids to feed. And so she had to go and fend for herself. And as she swam away from the home or the nest or whatever you could call it beneath in the ocean, she was terrified because it seemed like everything was trying to eat her. And she was really frightened in the session. She was laid there shaking, with her eyes closed in the chair. And this went on for some time, sort of dodging, just trying to stay alive. And then eventually she found what you could say was a cave or some rocks with a hole in it that she could go and hide in. And so she swam into this cave under some rocks, and immediately started to relax and was relieved that I'm safe here, nothing can get me. And then all of a sudden, she started to shake again and became tense because she realized that behind her in this cave, there was already something there. And it was she was breakfast. And then this thing launched itself at her and she lost one of her tentacles. She managed to swim away and she survived. And interestingly enough, as a result of that encounter and not dying, that baby squid felt a lot braver and a lot stronger because she hadn't died, and she realized that she could survive. And so there was a sort of a positive reframe to that particular past life. She didn't die horribly. It was just the fear of being killed that was, in some way, I don't know how, was causing the spider phobia.
Oh, that's really interesting.
It's strange.
Can you describe one of your most dramatic cases?
Well, in some cases, there's 2 types of dramatics. One is the dramaticness of the speed of the healing. So it may be, for example, I had a client who came with, she was an alcoholic, a functional alcoholic. For 16 years, she'd been working every day, getting home, started drinking, and by 9 o'clock every night, she was absolutely smashed. And this had gone on for 16 years. She was overweight, she was unhappy, she had terrible asthma, skin was awful, and her subconscious said it was all from past lives. And and she actually came to me to prove that I couldn't help her. She was forced to come to me by a friend who said, this man can help you. And she said, this bearded idiot can't help me, it'll be stupid. And she sat in front of me, and she just knew I couldn't help her. She was only there to prove to a friend. But she went into trance, she went into a past life, she started to cry, she released a lot of emotion, and she stopped drinking immediately. And that's unusual, because usually alcohol problems need quite a few sessions. After one session, she was cured. Although we did do more work, and she had several past lives, one in the First World War in the trenches, and another in Rome where she was fed to the lions as a Christian. So sometimes we get the dramatic cases where we get a person's had a lifelong problem or a many years serious problem, and in very few sessions they get better. And then there's the dramaticness where people are sometimes in trance reliving stuff in a past life, and they are more or less acting it out as it's happening. So I had one gentleman who was a psychologist, actually, and he was coming because he was having problems letting go of a relationship which had broken down, and he couldn't get this woman out of his head. And in one of the past lives, he was a Viking warrior. And as he was in battle, as he was laying in the chair with his eyelids closed, he was screaming, and his hands were thrashing out in front of him as if he was holding a sword, and he was hacking at people, people in his imagination as he was in battle, and shouting and screaming at them. And of course, I had to make sure that he kept himself in the chair and didn't fall out. But sometimes we get sessions like that, which are really quite dramatic. It doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. And it's fascinating when it happens. And of course, if a client is reliving it like that, they are also releasing the trauma very quickly as well. So I always know that they're going to get better, even though it's dramatic.
Do their problems ever come back later, or are they healed forever?
That's a clever question. I would say in probably 95% of cases, the problems are completely healed. In a few cases, something will come back, and it's maybe because that we missed something when we were first working on it, or maybe there's a new aspect of something comes up, and that occasionally can happen. But usually, once we've done the work, once we've worked everywhere we need to go, it may be that we've needed to work in 5 past lives, we've maybe needed to do work in this life and to rebirth them. We do take people back through the birth in this life. If we've done all of that and there's nothing left to work on, the problem should be completely healed forever.
Do you ever prompt anything or lead them?
No, and I have this standpoint that it has to come through from a client. So I can't stand the idea of therapists who lead the clients, and I do know that there are some who are like that. That for me is and shouldn't be done. It has to come from the client. Basically, I ask the client's subconscious where the causes of the problem is or are, and it can tell me. I just use yes with a finger response from the client, and then we move into it, and it comes through from the client. And I'm asking the subconscious questions regularly to make sure we're on the right track. But I don't lead the client forgivable and unprofessional.
Oh, that's good. I'm curious, when you talk about going into inherited traits, inherited trauma, can you give us a story of somebody you've regressed into inherited trauma? Because that's really interesting. Because you always hear stories of, oh, well, my family's cursed or
Yes.
Whatnot.
Yes.
Obviously, I don't believe in family curses, but the inherited trauma, that's really interesting. So if somebody's had like a really bad traumatic experience, they can actually pass that on to their kids?
Yeah. If a trauma isn't fully released, it's possible to pass that down to subsequent generations. And ancestral trauma is just as significant as past life trauma, which is just as significant as this life trauma. I had a client in London, the UK, just recently, and she went back into her great-grandmother's life, and she relived the trauma of her great-grandmother, where they were, the family were on some sort of motor launch or something going down a river, and the boy, her son, fell out of the boat and was pulled underneath the propeller, and he's had his legs chopped off, and then he subsequently died at the side of the river with the family around him, and his mother holding him, and obviously bereft. And my client re-experienced this as if she was her great grandmother. She saw it and she felt all the pain and all the agony. And this great grandmother never ever came to terms with the death of that boy. He was her favourite. And the other children were neglected after that. She could never come to terms with his death. It broke her heart completely. And so my client was incredibly emotional throughout that session, incredibly emotional as she released that trauma. But she's got severe anxiety in this life, my client, and this is one way in which we're releasing the anxiety. So she is getting better. I'm still working with her at the moment. So that's a recent case.
That's really interesting. I just find that fascinating. Now, I do want to discuss, before you do have a surprise for our listeners at the end of the show. We'll get into that. But I do want to talk about, because it's curious to me, and I just want to get your take on it, how this all lines up with religion. You know, I was brought up a Catholic, and I'm not a Catholic today, but I do consider myself Christian. I believe that there's a God, but I don't rule out reincarnation. Can you give us any examples of, say, somebody who's gone back that maybe they had a contact with Jesus, or maybe they were a famous religious figure, or how does this fit in with religion today? The whole heaven and hell aspect of it,
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly say from the hell perspective, from my perspective, there is no such place as hell. I have never, in thousands of regression sessions, had any single client, once they've died and leave the body, go to hell. It just does not seem to exist. And my take on it's a construct created by man to scare people. So I've never had a hell, but the heaven side of things, it's difficult to say what happens. We talk about going into spirit. So we leave our body, our soul leaves our body and goes to this place, which does appear to be somewhere up in the skies. And it's a place where our light body goes, and we meet up with other souls who have been around us in lifetime after lifetime, because we're often around the same souls life after life in different ways. So now that doesn't quite connect to the Christian concept of heaven, I understand that, but it does connect to the sort of spiritual concepts of what happens when we die and we move into another place, a place of love, a place of light, and a place of learning. So that's sort of one thing that can explain it in that way. Secondly, I've certainly had people in past lives who have been around at the time of Jesus and who saw Jesus. One gentleman was around at the time of the crucifixion, was in pieces. He was heartbroken when he saw Jesus dying. And I had another gentleman who I write about in the book, who appears to have been a healer and actually worked with Jesus for some years in those missing years of Jesus. It appears from his story that Jesus was a holy man who was trained, you could say, to be part of a group which is going round trying to heal and trying to raise people's consciousness. And that's quite a fascinating story, actually. I'm still in two minds. Was that a real story, or was he imagining it? I honestly don't know, but the information that he gave about being in this life in the desert, in some sort of monastery where he was trained, and they had initiation tests, and they were trained in meditation and trained to heal. And then Jesus comes along and tries to take everybody's energies even higher. Ultimately didn't work. It didn't work to try and take people's energies higher. It was just a fascinating one. So yes, I've had some people who felt that they were around at the time of Jesus. And there is, of course, this concept that Jesus himself taught reincarnation. And again, I don't want to offend any of your listeners who are Christians, but there is this viewpoint that all references to reincarnation were taken out of the Bible in, I think, 453 AD in one of the councils in Nicaea, I think. Except for one or two references, and the main one that still stayed in the Bible were Jesus' words, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap," which are words that Buddha said 600 years earlier, and which are a direct reference to reincarnation. So there is a school of thought that Jesus taught reincarnation, but it was all taken out of the Bible at an early stage because it wasn't political for people to think that they had control over their own destinies.
Yeah, that's just fascinating. Now, as far as time goes, have you ever gotten anybody who is, say, had a past life but in the future?
Yeah, we do future lives sometimes, and in fact there are a few therapists who focus solely on future life progression as a healing process. And I used to do past life and future life workshops, group workshops. I haven't done one for a number of years, but we do a past life regression with a group, and then we do a future life regression, take them 300, 500 years in the future. And I'll be honest, I actually stopped doing it because I got very depressed after a while, because most of the people in my groups were saying horrible things about being on Earth in the future. They were saying it's awful, there's been massive wars and total breakdown of civilizations, and we're all living under the ground, and we can't go out into the sunlight because we get radiation burns. And a lot of people were saying these sort of things, and it just really bothered me, because I thought we're in the age of Aquarius. I thought we were coming through all that nonsense, and we were now, coming to create a better state, a better place on Earth. So I stopped doing them. But actually, I did speak to some colleagues who were also doing past and future life workshops, and they said completely the opposite. People in their workshops were getting wonderful experiences 300 and 500 years in the future. It was wonderful. It's the age of Aquarius, and there's no more war, and everybody's very spiritual and caring for each other. So I was thinking, well, I don't know about this anymore. Is this all imaginary? Are the people who were in my groups just reflecting the fact that I'm a miserable so-and-so? I honestly don't know. So I don't do much future life stuff because I don't think you can prove it. Whereas at least with the past life stuff, from time to time, you can prove that it's real. But it is possible, apparently, to take people into future lives.
Now, what about the idea that we're living in a simulation, that we're all a big program? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's something I've not really looked at. So I honestly don't know. I can't really comment on that. What I do wonder about, though, are what are called parallel worlds and parallel universes. This idea that everything that is happening at the same time someplace else in a different way, in a slightly different way, as if there's like an infinite number of realities. That's pretty mind-blowing. And certainly I have occasionally had a client who appears to be working not in a past life, but in a parallel world life, where something is happening to them in a parallel world, which they are experiencing in their body here. And we have to release what is going on in that parallel world in order to heal them now. And that doesn't happen often, but it does sometimes happen. So I do wonder if there is, much, much more to this idea of time and life and many lives than we actually can even think about.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Is
It's
I mean,
fascinating.
just life in general. That the whole, it's nothing what we think it to be, is it?
That, very much so, very much so. I mean, as David Icke says, he talks a lot about, is it visible light? The spectrum of visible light, we can see something like 0.0001% of light. So that means there's 99.9999% of stuff that we are missing, that we can't even see, which is there. And when you think in those terms, it's just mind blowing.
Do you believe in ghosts?
Oh, very much so. And in fact, occasionally I have clients who, after they died in a past life, stay around on Earth as a ghost for some time. And that's either because they don't want to leave, they don't want to go up into the spirit and move on because their loved ones are still on Earth, and so they want to stay around them. Or it may be that they want to stay around and try and hurt somebody that's just killed them. So I certainly had one lady who was a witch. Well, she was killed as a witch. I've had many, many, many hundreds of people in past life sessions who have been killed as accused of being witches and then horribly tortured or killed. There's a madness that went through the society a few hundred years ago with this. And one lady, she was so angry and upset about what had happened that she stayed around. And the ringleader of the people that persecuted her and killed her, she hung around him and was doing her best to make life miserable for him whenever she could from the other side. So, yeah, I believe totally in ghosts. In fact, I'm an ex-restaurateur. I started life as a hotel manager, and my restaurant years ago was very haunted, and we had all sorts of ghostly goings on in that restaurant.
So you think being a ghost is a choice?
No, I think sometimes people, when they die, are very lost and confused or scared, and they don't know what to do. So sometimes there is a choice. Sometimes they want to stay around, but sometimes they're just lost and they don't know what to do, where to go. They're scared. In fact, sometimes I do spirit release work. Occasionally I find clients have spirit attachments and we have to send the spirit attachment home so that the client can get better.
You mean like another entity that's clung to them?
Yeah. And actually, I actually think this is a much bigger problem than people give credence to. It appears especially what tends to happen is if our energies are low, and especially if we're depressed or down, then it's almost like our energy is sticky, and these beings, these spirits, can hook into us. And I mean, they're usually not malevolent or horrible, although there can be apparently some nasty spirits. Most of them are just lost, and they just hook into us and they hang on to us, and then we pick up on their energies. And they can affect us physically, and they certainly affect us emotionally. And sometimes we have to send them home. So part of my training has been to learn how to do spirit release work and send them off where they should go.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Have you ever had anybody that say they're living the same life over and over again? Do you think maybe that's possible? Like, say, for instance, I were to die, could I go back and just be born again and live the exact same life again?
I don't think so. But then again, the concept of time that we have is this linear concept. And I don't know, it could be that time is completely fluid. It could be that we can go back and re-experience life, the same life. It could be. But I don't think that happens usually, unless that's another aspect of things that we just don't know about because we just can't see it.
That's pretty... All right, well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Steve you have something for us, don't you? You want to tell everybody what you have?
Yeah, so I know you've been doing some stuff on lucid dreaming on your show, and when we were talking about setting this up, you said about possibly doing a meditation to help people do some lucid dreaming. So I thought, okay, I've done a bit of work on it, and if anybody is interested, then we're going to do a short, probably about 15 minutes of a short inner meditation to see if we can help you, if you're interested, to do some lucid dreaming, either tonight or in the next few days.
All right. So this is Conflict Radio. We'll be right back right after this. So welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're with Steve Burgess. And Steve, why don't you tell us where to find you?
Okay, I've got a website which is lionheart-training.com, lionheart-training.com. I have a WordPress site which has my blogs and podcasts on, which is hypnoblogpod.wordpress.com, hypnoblogpod.wordpress.com. So if people are interested in training with me or having online therapy sessions, those are the sites to go through. I have a Facebook page, The Power of Past Life Regression, which includes a lot of information about past lives, obviously, named after the book. And I also have a free YouTube channel called Hypno for All. That's the number 4, HYPNO, for all, which is free hypnotherapy recordings for people to listen to in order to get some benefit out of the incredible healing power and potential of hypnotherapy. So I love people to go on there and listen to the recordings, and please subscribe and tell your friends, because for me it's a very important thing that hypnotherapy is as well known as possible.
All right. And just so everybody knows, we're not going to have a normal outro to this show. Steve is going to do our outro. So when he's done, the show's just going to be over. You can find us always, conflictradio.net, YouTube, like, subscribe, all the normal podcatchers. And just a disclaimer for everybody, you don't want to listen to this part if you're driving down the road or cutting down a tree or any of that nature, right, Steve? You want them to make sure you're in bed and comfortable and in a place where you can.
That's exactly it. You should only do this if you're able to close your eyes down, close your eyelids down, and relax in a comfortable place. Do not listen to this while you're operating machinery or ironing clothes or doing anything that requires concentration. This part of the show should only be done with your eyelids closed where you can relax. Okay.
All right. That being said, everybody have a great time, and we'll catch you next time on Conflict Radio. Steve, it's all yours.
Okay. So what I'd like you to do when you feel ready is just find somewhere comfortable where you can just sit or lay for about the next 15 minutes with your eyelids closed down. And when you're ready to do so, just close your eyelids over your beautiful eyes, let yourself go inside, and just begin the process of relaxing. So all I'm going to ask you to do is to allow your body to soften down and to allow yourself just to begin to drift a little bit, allow your body to feel more comfortable. Maybe you can just think about muscles around your body relaxing and imagine a wave of relaxation just flowing down through the top, from the top of your head down to the tips of your toes. So just imagine some of the muscles in your body relaxing in your forehead and face and jaw. Allow your eyelids to feel heavy and relaxed. Imagine muscles in the back of your neck and shoulders loosening and relaxing, and then down your back, down your spine to the lower part of your back. Maybe you can imagine a wave of relaxation moving down through your arms, from your shoulders, down through your elbows to your wrists. And then just breathing relaxation down through your chest into your tummy. Maybe you'd like to rest your mind on the rhythm of your breathing just for a few moments. You don't have to control your breath. Just feel your breathing slowing down. And perhaps You can feel a sense of calmness and a sense of ease, as though each gentle breath that you take is helping you to relax more and more deeply now. And then just allow relaxation to move down through your legs, from your hips, down through your knees to the tips of your toes. And whilst you're just resting in this pleasant way, and perhaps you may find from time to time you can drift deeper into relaxation, I'm going to ask you just to think about going to bed tonight. So if you're already in bed, then you can just be aware of laying in your bed and feeling the comfort of your bed underneath your body and the blanket or duvet on top. But if you're not yet in bed, then just visualize or just imagine yourself going to bed, climbing into bed, laying your head on the pillow, and just laying in a comfortable way, and feeling yourself getting ready to fall asleep. And as you're doing this, I'm going to ask you to make the intention for you to have a lucid dream tonight or over the next few nights. So I want you just to think these words to yourself. Tonight when I dream, I ask my subconscious to wake up my conscious mind, and I will be able to control my dreams. So just say those words in your head. Tonight when I dream, I ask my subconscious to wake up my conscious mind, and I will be able to control my dreams. And then imagine, as you drift off to sleep, you're just thinking these words. I will know I am dreaming. I will know I am dreaming. I know I am dreaming. And then I'm going to say some words as if I am you. I can say these words for you in the first person. So you can just stay relaxing now and just hear these words in your mind as if you're thinking these words. I become aware that I am dreaming while I continue to dream. I am now able to realize, whilst I'm asleep, that I am in the midst of a dream. I am aware when I am dreaming. I control my actions in the dream. I can have lucid dreams now without waking up from sleep. I realize when I'm dreaming that I am actually asleep in bed, but that I am still asleep as I dream. And I will become a self-aware observer as well as a participant of my dreams. And when I become aware that I am dreaming, I have control over my dreams. I am able to affect the outcome of my dreams as I become self-aware whilst I'm dreaming. I will even have more fun whilst I sleep as I become lucid while dreaming. Just stay relaxing. Let me say some more words. It can be words that you can think to yourself in your mind. I now imagine myself in bed asleep at night, this night or the next few nights. from somewhere deep inside my mind, images, sounds, and feelings are conjured up as my mind's inner movie projector presents a dream. Suddenly, in a flash of insight, I feel myself become aware that the images are a projection of my mind. I realize that I am in the middle of a dream. I am completely aware that what I see and hear and feel is a product of my own mind. I also realize that I can say or do anything I wish to say or do in the dream as the dream continues. I can even choose to change the images and events in the dream by gently and confidently using my willpower. I am a lucid dreamer now. I can experience lucid dreams. Beginning tonight, I will produce a dream in which I become self-aware. I will know that I am dreaming and that I have full control over my actions in the dream. I will remember the lucid dreams that I have so that I can enjoy thinking about them the next day. And the more I practice lucid dreaming, the easier it becomes to take control of my dreams and to change the outcome of my dreams so that my dreams are positive. And as my dreams become more positive, as I create positive outcomes in my dreams, my life becomes more positive because my subconscious mind influences my conscious mind every day. So I choose to change images and events in my dreams by gently using my willpower so that my dreams now become more positive. My life becomes more positive. I am a lucid dreamer. I have lucid dreams when I sleep. So just stay resting now for a few more moments and allow those words just to settle deeply into your subconscious. And run a movie in your mind of laying in bed, the dreams going through your mind, and you're controlling those dreams and making positive outcomes happen. Now what you'll find as you sleep tonight is my words will just be working gently through your subconscious. And if it's safe and appropriate for you to enjoy lucid dreaming tonight or the next few nights, you may be quite surprised quite how powerful you can make your dreams. Now, if you're already laying in bed ready to sleep, then you can just turn off this recording now and let yourself drift off to sleep. Otherwise, in a few moments, I'm going to just start counting you up from 1 to 10 and ask you with each number to come back little by little to full awareness. And later on, when you go to bed to sleep, my words will just float through your subconscious mind. And you can make that intention when you go to bed tonight. Tonight, I will be able to control my dreams. Tonight, I will have lucid dreams. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to let my voice go with you now, and slowly and gently with each number come back little by little to full awareness on the count of 10. So when you're ready now, 1. Just feel yourself gently coming back to 2. Slowly coming back to 3. Gently up to 4. Slowly up to 5. And just feel yourself little by little coming back to full awareness now to 5. Maybe starting to move your body a little bit, your fingers, your feet. Slowly up to 6. Start to stretch a little bit. Gently up to 7. Feel yourself coming back up, more and more alert now, more and more aware, all the way to 8. Right the way to 9. And all the way back to 10. So take some nice, slow, gentle, deep breaths. Have a good stretch. Open your eyes. Come all the way back. And feel good now.